man speaking in the city square, trying to tell somebody that he cares. Can you blame the voice of youth for asking what is true? Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are gonna be the leaders in a little while, when will the lonely voice of youth cry what is true? This our world's waking to a newborn babe, and I solemnly swear it'll be their way. You better help that voice of youth find what is true. And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is true?
All right, we're here. Feel like it cut off my video like half a second too early, but that's okay. We can deal with these small glitches. Although I haven't had any small glitches, something is definitely wrong with the laptop. No idea what's going on. Oh, goodness. What a week. Merry Christmas, everybody. Everybody had a wonderful Christmas. I know I did. So, yeah, good pirate Christmas. And I had apple crisp after dinner today. So that was unbelievably awesome. And here we are talking about steps and skipping steps and shortcuts and all sorts of fun things. So I'm just going to start out with some things I noticed that are just, strange. I did a tweet on meritocracy recently. And of course, I don't skip steps. And so before I did my tweet, I was like, well, let's go look up meritocracy, make sure we get the right definition, see what the zeitgeist or whatever it is on it. And meritocracy on Wikipedia, which was my favorite, like was the only thing I looked at, but like also my favorite. The notion of a political system in which economic or political power are vested in individual people based on ability and talent rather than wealth or social class. And of course, being Wikipedia, that's just wrong because it's Wikipedia. And it's merit, like actual merit, like what you deserve, right? That's weird. That's the etymology. Right now, we're just into the etymology and the strength of government, right? So it's what you deserve in terms of amounts of strength of government or something, or maybe how you deserve to be treated, how much the strength of government affects you as well. But that's actually the etymology. It's a Latin and Greek term, of course, because English is a terrible language. So in a meritocracy, people should rule based on what they quote deserve. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? Uh, what your amount of quote rulership, whatever that means, should be based on what you quote deserve. Well, that's completely undefined. So how do you determine? Like, this is impractical, right? It's skipping a bunch of steps. Like, what do you mean by deserve, right? And you go back to Clint Eastwood, right? Deserves got nothing to do with it. I can't remember the name of the Western now. This is Magnus Opum Western. That was quite good. But you can notice the use of the term individual, which of course they use again, right? But the first use of this term was denoted to describe a, quote, dystopian political system, end quote. But the author that used it originally used it correctly, and it didn't sound dystopian to me. So, it's just everything slipped and upside down and backwards. But then the term changed to a use of, it, what did they say? It mediated or some stupid 2-cent Harvard word, but basically it changed to be a positive, from a negative. And and it's personal advancement and success, right? Primarily reflected by an individual's capabilities and merits. Of course, that's using the word to define the word. That's not terribly helpful, right? Like let's not make that error, huh? That would be great. Um, but merit is a standard. It's not something an individual possesses, right? It's something they're judged in relationship to. And of course, we're missing relationship, hence the intimacy crisis. It's kind of a big problem. And we are taking a bunch of shortcuts in life. And so, we want like a shortcut for our meritocratic ability to either exist in the government or obtain success or whatever. And I mean, imagine being judged on your uh, capabilities. Like, how horrible. Um, and the U.S. had a mostly meritocratic system where the meritocracy was based on competence, roughly speaking. A little bit more to it, but competence was a factor. And we've moved away from that. Now it's skin color or oppression rating, or maybe it's um, what you think you're entitled to in the moment, or how you identify. Like it's just, we still have a meritocracy. We've just changed the standard of judgment because we skipped a few steps. And then another thing I ran across, I think it was yesterday, just very funny. This guy did a video, and it's like the fallacy of Sabine Hassenfelder. Now, I like Sabine. I mean, she's got a bunch of stuff wrong, but yeah, so does everybody else. So who cares? Um, and she goes after science right now. She's been doing that a little bit for a while. Been going after science, kind of betrayed her, right? A very personal story at some level. Um, and fair enough. Like, I agree with most of her critiques. She's very good with some of her critiques. But his framing was the following: like, she's been criticizing science rather heavily, right? And is accused of promoting an anti-science attitude, right? This is true. Like, I agree that definitely happened, right? But then he talks about how he met her in person at a talk in Munich and decided she was humble, approachable, and friendly. And then he stated this was some kind of mystery, and he needed to break that down. And that was the fallacy that he was talking about. Now, I'm going to skip all the steps of watching his retarded video because it's obvious BS. Like, why can somebody not be approachable and humble and friendly and be anti-science at the same time? Like, why are those two things linked in your mind? Are you like, okay, do you need some kind of assistance? Like, did you not take a medication you were supposed to? Or maybe you took medication you shouldn't have? Like, I don't understand. It's genuinely confusing to me. Like, that's the thesis you're running your video on? She was nice and approachable and friendly and humble, and was willing to talk to me, and she made total sense when she was on the stage. So how could she possibly be anti-science? There's some kind of fallacy. Do you know what fallacy means, dude? Like, why don't you take an English course first and then we'll chat, right? Because clearly you're not there yet. Not there. And a lot of what we see today is that. Right? It's people who aren't there. Like, I know somebody told you could read and that you were wicked good at it or something, but actually you're a little dumb. And maybe you'll always be that dumb. I don't know. But right now, you and I need to not be having this conversation because you're not there. It happened to me on Twitter today. Today, I actually had to explain to somebody that water and food were resources unlike other resources such as iron. Why he didn't understand that, I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry, I just don't. And he kept saying, I don't understand your point. And I was like, the first time he said it, I was like, well, maybe this conversation is not like for you. Like, like, maybe you need something easier. And then he did it again. And I said, yeah, maybe you just need something easier. This is not If you can't understand this, like you shouldn't be talking. Like, I'm sorry. Shouldn't be speaking to anyone about anything. If you don't understand how food and water are different from other resources, I don't have anything for you. I'm completely bereft of tools at that point. I'm just, are you 5 and someone gave you an iPhone? Like I don't understand. And this kind of people skip a lot of steps. So the YouTube folks right now are saying they're different from the legacy media because, and here's their example: Brett Cooper, who was at the Daily Wire and recently quit, and she sort of built up a channel that pre-existed her, which some of these guys actually admit to, pre-existed her, um, and then they were saying, look, the reason why this is different is because YouTube is different, and people follow personalities and not channels, and so her entire audience is probably going to go with her on her new venture. Okay. And they contrast that directly with the legacy media without specific examples, by the way, because, well, as you'll see, there aren't any, uh, you know, and they're just living in a fantasy, right? Because this is a problem in the legacy media too, and it always has been. And the fact that we'll say the Daily Wire or really any of these outfits, because there's a bunch of them, by the way, they only talk about Daily Wire. I don't know why. That's a little suspicious, though, isn't it? They'll talk about all the other outfits that do the same contracts. All of those same contracts are the same as the contracts of the legacy media. They're identical contracts practically, except they're really not, because ultimately with YouTube, there's certain concessions you have to make. Like you can't prevent somebody from starting another YouTube channel, whereas you can actually prevent them from starting another media venture in legacy media for many, many reasons, many, many constraints there, right? So they're pretending as though they have the lock on this, when in fact the legacy media has the same problem, which is why those contracts exist. And the Daily Wire contracts are super generous, actually. And even Tim Pool talks about this. And then there's all this confusion around how the law works. People are saying, like, oh, she's under NDA, so she can't talk. And then Tim Pool says, no, bro, you can. And guess what? If you try to take somebody to court on an NDA, it's 50-50 whether or not you'll get it, even if they violated it. Sometimes the judge just says, yeah, I don't care. Because that happens. And Tim Pool's like, yeah, it's happened to me a couple of times. People have been under my NDAs and they've broken my NDAs. I took them to court and the judge said, yeah, the NDA was definitely broken and I'm not going to do anything. Like, I don't, people are very confused about how the world works because they skipped the step of doing the research. And they really believe that the rules of how people interact and cooperate in the world don't apply because tech or something. Like I don't know what I don't know. I don't understand it. And it's going to get a lot worse out there, folks, right? Like more people are denying more reality due to skipping these steps. Do your research, know your history, figure out what the hell you're talking about before you yap your mouth. And maybe, like, if you're in over your head because you don't understand something, maybe don't continue to comment. Like, maybe back out and go do something useful. I don't know. And there's this meme out there about, we're going to run out of conspiracy theories by 2025 because they all keep coming true. And look, it's hysterical. It's so funny. But the problem is that most conspiracy theories have conflicting views, right? They are basically overlapping explanations or theories for the same end result. And so a lot of conspiracy theories are describing exactly the same end result, but different mechanisms for causality for how we're going to get there. And so, like, the meme doesn't hold, right? The fact that a pattern was predicted and manifested an end result doesn't validate any of the theories that could explain it. Like that's not how that works. That's a confusion of correlation for causation. And in the case of conspiracy theories, we're dealing with multiple correlations and single causation. So you better figure that one out. Right? So people saying that are, skipping the hard work of logically working this out. Like they claim to be logical, rational, reasonable beings. And then when they have to do the logic, reason, rationality, they don't do the work. They're skipping the step. So in more news, I watched Am I a Racist? Which is absolutely brilliant. Um, and part of what makes something like that funny um, and so smart, right, is that we don't recognize smartness and funniness as being sort of together, right? And so we're surprised when it happens. It's like, well, no, actually, comedy is generally done by really smart people, at least smart in a way. And maybe we should recognize that those two things go together, but for some reason we don't. And the thing is, the nice thing about this is what's going on, right? One of the tricks that Matt Walsh uses is mentioning things that are sort of connected without expressly talking about them at all, right? So he's just sort of using visual linking of things, right? Which is a better, richer, deeper form of communication. It's more, quote, symbolic, if you will. Things that belong together and are inseparable, right? But he doesn't say any of that. Like he doesn't speak it in the dialogue. And he points out a bunch of contradictions to relativism, right? How relativism has to lead to contradictions. If autism is on a spectrum, you're going to get a bunch of contradictions in autism. Like you have to. There's no way around it, right? They're related, right? Relativism and contradictory logical conclusions are inevitable unless you get rid of the relativism, in which case everything's fine. Also, you have to get rid of the relativism. So don't skip that step because that's one of the steps people skip. The thing is, too, it's like a high contrast film, right? He points out the stupidity of TV talking heads. He shows you the difference between the educated class and the working class. He exemplifies the sort of the paucity of the system that is, quote, anti-racism. Of course, it's impossible to anti-racism, right? Because racism is talking about race. That's what it is, right? And so there's no such thing as anti talking about race. There's just the absence of talking about race, right? Which would be not using race. So there's no anti-race. It's not a possible thing. There's no reverse racism. It can't be reversed. It's not applicable. But we've compressed the world and made everything small and done retarded transitory math on transitory math on language, which is wrong. Language doesn't work that way, right? And so you can use the transitive property in math, but you can't necessarily use it in language, certainly not with all words. So let's let's go through some examples of confusions due to skipping steps. And this somehow I missed until an hour and a half ago. But it's my favorite, right? We're telling stories out of chronological order. And that is absolute poison for society. It's the worst thing ever, is this broken storyline, jump back and forth storytelling. It's horrible. It's horrible. Because what happens is you're not exposed to a story with proper ordering. That means you don't know how to order things. And then you'll make connections in the story that aren't based on time. And so you think that people know things or should know things or could know things, or if only they knew those things because I knew them because they were brought to me out of order on the TV or in the movie or whatever, in the book maybe, right? That this world would have been different. And then you cast that into the author's, text because you're a postmodern, unfortunately, even though they were wrong, but everything's just ignore everything they ever said. That's not good because then everybody loses the flavor for how to order things in time, which means you can't understand concepts like patience properly. You can't. And you don't even know that you can't, which is, worse. So another good one is, we can't right now even discern equality of opportunity from equality from equity, right? But these are all different statements, and they cannot be put or dealt with in random order. And that's like a major problem, right? You have to have a frame. It can't be put in random frames. The idea of equality relies on a frame, right? Like equality from what and to what end. That's part of your framing. Then you can talk about what equal opportunity would mean, right? Once you've defined equality, and then you can discuss how to manifest equity. But don't skip steps. And you have to do them in order. You have to do all those steps and you have to do them in order, and they're not trivial. And this is the problem with skipping steps. And the problem is when we talk about something like liberalism, so you hear a lot of this liberal, classic liberal, people mixing those two up, which is super dangerous, by the way. They're not the same. For liberalism, any constraint or consequence is tyranny. It's automatic tyranny, and it's automatically bad. And there's nothing in between. There's no steps in between liberalism and tyranny. None. This is just skipping the steps that are there, right? It's basically a socialist idea that, and this is why it's inherently leftist, right? Liberalism is leftism, right? You don't need any kind of management or structure or authority to set things up and keep them going. So obviously, anything that does that must be a tyrant against which you must fight or rebel. I mean, that's the whole trick here. I mean, I do have a video on the trick of socialism. It's this that's where you can get more on this, right? It's just that. Classical liberalism is a liberalism based in the classics, which is the rediscovery of the ancient Greek and Roman texts, effectively, and a few pieces, augmented by a few pieces of what we call Western canon. And so when you do that, though, now you have a reasonable ground for liberalism that can work. But liberalism as a word by itself hanging out there, you're skipping too many steps. You're skipping all of these steps to get this freedom, this mysterious freedom, which can't make any sense unless you say freedom from what and freedom to what. And nobody ever does that. Ignoring or denying the idea of a class system is a denial of steps. People don't start at the same place. And if everyone was of the same class, there's no development in the world. You can't change. You can't be different. You can't see yourself because you can't contrast yourself to other classes of people. And so no development is possible. And no roles could be carried out because if there are no classes, then everybody should be able to do exactly the same job. Because everyone's the same and they're all equal. This doesn't make any sense. We're not equal. But this idea is based in equality doctrine. You have a class system, whether you want one or not, and it's important whether you think so or not. It's just denying that is a denial of hierarchy as such. There is a natural hierarchy. People with 2 legs can run faster than a person with 1 leg. People with longer legs run faster than people with shorter legs. People who are taller can get stuff off the top shelf. I don't like that will create a class in and of itself, but there are more important considerations. Did you grow up starving? Well, guess what, my friend? That puts you at a disadvantage to somebody who didn't grow up starving. But like that's the world. Like what are you going to do about it? And that's creation denial. We're created differently, and the creation that we're in affects us differently. I'm sorry, like that already happened. There's nothing anybody can do about it. But something came first and something came second. That alone will give you a class, right? Oh, respect your elders. Yeah, you probably should by default. Maybe not if they're rude, but and that's a no steps exist sort of a thing. And therefore everything is equal. In fact, and barf. Equality doctrine is evil. I know, don't do that. Don't make that mistake, and then you don't have to fix that mistake. All these problems, it's like if you don't create the problem, you don't have to fix the problem, and then you create something that isn't a problem instead. How about that for a plan? And this equality doctrine, this equality dogma, has led us down a dark path indeed, to where we oversimplify, right? We remove the steps, we just ignore hierarchy, but that reduces our ability to discern the world. We're skipping the steps. We skip the steps so that we can have equality. We're skipping the steps. We're ignoring the hierarchy so that we can all be equal. We're not all equal. We're not ever going to be all equal. We're not ever going to have been all equal. I'm sorry. If equality, then evolutionary theory set is wrong entirely. The whole thing, all of it. You have to throw it all out. So obviously equality is not right. It's not even right to the damn individualists. Of course, they don't know that because they're that dumb. And it really is that dumb. This guy argued with me about whether or not people would fight over resources through mimicry or any other thing. And I was like, well, if you don't have enough food and water, you're probably going to fight. It's probably going to lead to violence. And he did not understand the point. He didn't understand what I was saying. And I'm like, I don't understand why this is hard. Maybe you're just not at the level where you should be having these sorts of conversations with people online. I don't know, man. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say, yeah, you're a little stupid. I'm sorry you're a little stupid. Maybe you were born that way. I don't know. Also, why are you spending your time in a conversation you, by your own admission, don't understand and can't follow? Are you okay, bro? I think not. And the thing is, we skip a lot of steps with people. And, oh, Mark's mean. Look what he just said. Yeah, what I said was true and correct and important. No one's telling this guy, listen, you shouldn't be in these conversations. You're not following something. You should bow out. Take some time to reflect. Maybe reconsider your position. If someone's saying something you don't understand, maybe they're nuts, in which case you shouldn't engage with them. Maybe if you can't understand their point and they're not nuts, maybe that means you're wrong, in which case you also shouldn't engage with them. Right. Oh, weird. It doesn't matter what set of conditions you come up with in that scenario, they shouldn't be engaging. The solution's the same. Weird. Weird. And no one's told them that. That sucks. Someone should have told them that. Do these people engage? Like, do they do the work? Or do they just attack, right? Do they feign victim? Do they protest? Are they doing this opponent processing thing or do they cooperate? Right? Do they try to cooperate? Do they make a claim? Or are they questioning? Are they like open? Like, oh, I don't understand what you mean by that. Or, oh, when you say that, do you mean this? Right? Now, or do they restate what you said as a claim, even if you didn't make a claim? Because that happens all over Twitter. And what is the work? What are the steps? Start with being polite and noticing if other people are polite. Because that's important. Maybe they're skipping steps and you're not. Well, that's good to know. Start with assuming good faith. That way, the bad faith will always come out and you'll see it quicker. You'll see it a lot quicker. Right? But you got to know it's there and you've got to be willing to look for it. Right? Unfortunately, we have an epidemic right now, especially online, but pretty much everywhere, of trying to aim for redemption first. So the minute anybody makes a mistake or says something bad or seems to be going down a bad path from somebody else's perspective, um, they start making excuses or trying to reframe things such that that person doesn't look so bad. The problem with this is it's unnecessary for you to do that on the person's behalf because I need to judge them on their merits and not on your willingness to intervene. Right. The fact that somebody has to intervene means maybe they shouldn't be in that conversation in or interaction in the first place, which is a way more important and larger deal than saving them or redeeming their statement or pulling them out of their own way. No, no, let them get the consequences for their actions or they'll never learn, but they will get worse for sure. And that's actually a double badness. And when you try to redeem people or excuse their behavior, you're skipping steps. First, figure out where they're standing. And then figure out if they know where they're standing. Like, do you understand the claim you made? Because the guy I was arguing with on Twitter didn't understand the claim that he made. I mean, he made it pretty clearly and he made it without prompting, but he clearly didn't understand the claim that he made. He didn't understand the claim I made. He said the only way of violence is through mimicry. And I was like, well, actually, I do think Gerard says that, and that's wrong. And it takes 2 seconds to know that it's wrong. People get violent all the time out of sheer anger, and they don't want anything the other person has. They just want that person gone. Like, I don't, people get violent over resources like food and water, not because other people have them and they don't, but because they need them to live. Those are very different motivations. Do they also want to have like all the water that somebody else has? Maybe, but that's not the same as saying that it's always mimicry. Violence is not always caused by mimicry. That's the most insane statement I've ever heard in my life. No, it's clearly observably just false. And then they'll do the Gerard trick, which is, well, not personal violence. And it's like, well, then a bunch of Gerard's points are wrong because he gives a bunch of personal examples and uses that to justify his statement. And B, what's the difference? If I'm a king and I get personally upset at another king for insulting me because he wouldn't marry my daughter or something, whatever, and I go to war, how is that mimicry? The answer is it's not in any way, shape, or form, by the way. For the viewers at home, you just skipped a bunch of steps, right? And he didn't try to clarify my position, and he didn't clarify his position. I restated his position and he agreed with it, but he clearly didn't know where he was standing. But once you know where someone's standing, and once you know if they know where they're standing, then you can clarify their position, right? That's the proper order of steps. Now you can judge them. Before that, you can't judge them. And that's the problem. We're skipping the steps of doing all the work to understand where they're standing. And it's not like the dust up between, Carl Benjamin did a stream on MAGA versus Tech Bros or whatever. And I understand where he's standing. I mean, where he's standing is stupid and binary thinking is bad. See my video. And some of the stuff he's saying is idiotic and just misses all the important nuance. But I understand where he's standing. It's just stupid. And it's important that now I know where he's standing. You look, if somebody's putting one thing against another, they're a dualist. That's what dualism actually is. Screw the so-called philosophical definition. Dual. Like the language actually works if you use it. I know a lot of people are using it and they're not qualified because they skipped a bunch of steps and they gave them a degree when in fact they should have made sure they knew how to use the language before they let them use the language. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or flip here, but also like, no, really, look at Twitter. And the thing is, like, we do this so often that we don't know how to judge people anymore because having a person make a mistake is, well, ordinary, average. It's banal. It's kind of boring. Like, everybody makes mistakes, bro. Who the freaking hell cares? Seriously. But what they do after they make a mistake is super important, right? And what others do around them is even more important. Because if somebody makes a mistake and everybody does nothing about it and kind of ignores it or doesn't confront them with their error, they're never going to get better, but they are getting worse. Getting worse because of entropy is the default condition. So if the people around the person making a mistake is not trying to correct that mistake, that person's getting worse. And look, often there are people around them that are a leader or a moderator or somebody who's there all the time who formed the group. Are they taking responsibility for mediating this person within their group? Because if they're not, then the mistake is compounded by them. And that's a bad error. It's no longer a mistake. Mistakes can be corrected. Errors cause damage. If someone behaves badly and you're in charge of the space and you don't do something about it, everything gets worse and there's a bunch of damage. And what people do when mistakes are made by others matters a lot. And do you see all the steps? I'm not trying to enumerate them here. I'm trying to say, man, there's a lot there. And the problem is we just reduce mistakes to the worst thing ever. And then we can't tell, is this a mistake or is it on purpose? Did Bill Clinton misspeak when he said, I did not have sex with that woman? No, of course he didn't misspeak. That wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something he did in a speech. He also did it in a speech. Oh, did you know that? Did you do your research? Did you look it up? It's historical fact. Like, of course not. Of course not. And you can't reduce mistakes to the worst thing ever because it doesn't allow discernment. You have to know. And you can't know if you're not doing the work and going through the steps, which take time, energy, and attention. Our most valuable and precious things. How else are we skipping steps? Well, a good way to skip steps is abstraction. And abstractions are fine, but how are they connected to the world? Did you just list one item for the abstraction and equate whatever abstraction with one thing? Well, then it's not an abstraction. Then it's just another name for that thing. This is not a helpful way to speak and think and talk about the world, guys. And a lot of people are doing that trick, by the way. Also, I suggest you don't listen to any of them. You turn them off immediately. I don't think they're bad people, but they might be stupid. And stupid people can cause a hell of a lot of damage to you. And you skip steps when you use abstractions. You're missing nuance. Everybody goes, oh, we need to introduce nuance. Stop using the 5-cent Harvard abstraction words that you don't even use correctly, please. And then we'll have our nuance back because the two go hand in hand. You got to swap one for the other, bro. Not that you can't use them both, but then you have to use them both and not use one in place of the other when it's abstraction. You can't use abstractions in place of pragmatic things to do. You can use pragmatic things to do in place of abstractions, though. Abstractions are kind of useless, which is good because some people can't think in abstractions. We know this experimentally. And yet they can have a full, wonderful life better than the lives of most PhDs. That's for sure. That might be a hint as to how the world is structured. It's not designed for smart people. We don't live in a creation that requires you to be intelligent. We live in a creation that requires you to be true, good, and beautiful. It does have no overlap with IQ or intelligence or smartness at all. Sorry. You want to venerate those people, go right ahead, but you do that at your peril. And the thing is, did you actually do the research? So I get in this whole thing about Gerard, and I was saying, guys, you're going to be careful with Gerard. He says these things. And of course, somebody said, oh, no, I think Gerard would say, and I'm like, here we go again. Understand that you're used to talking to lazy people who aren't precise in their speech and don't do their research. That is not me. I mean, I like to win, so we can play this game all day long, but like, this is what Gerard said himself in an interview. And then I said, yeah, and here are the tricks he uses to enchant people. And so they don't notice that he says outrageously incorrect things like the Holy Ghost and Satan are the same because they both critique. Like, no, like, I don't. Is there a word that means more no than no? Because we need that word. Like, I don't. And I get all this pushback, and I'm like, bro, it's what he said, man. I don't know what to tell you. I know you want to redeem him right away because he had a good idea, maybe an idea and a half that was decent. And it, to be fair, it is the number one thing that we should be talking about, but aren't, is mimicry. And maybe number two is sacrifice. And he uses scapegoat, but he means sacrifice. But whatever. Very sneakily changes scapegoat from innocent, or from guilty to innocent, and scapegoat means anybody punished for anything, and then it suddenly means death, the person who's killed. And then the scapegoat oddly gets venerated. I mean, all this stuff. He does all these tricks in this interview. It's look, he's very clever, also evil, but very clever, but also evil. Let's focus on that, right? Let's focus on that. So I get it. And then this person was clearly enchanted, and fair enough. He's a very enchanting speaker. I'm just immune to most forms of enchantment most of the time. Lucky me. So I see right through this stuff like the sun shining in the sky at noon on a cloudless day. But most people don't. I get that. I didn't understand that, as well, like 5 years ago, even as I do now, or maybe 6 years ago, pre Peterson or something. But basically, Gerard enchants people. And this person didn't want to engage with my notes and instead said, no, I'll listen to she had listened to this. Same thing I listened to and missed all of this. And I'm like, well, at your peril, at your peril. Offered to help you, didn't want the help. Did you do the research? Did you pay attention? Did you take notes when the guy was talking? Most people don't do the work. They skip the steps. Did you check historically for accuracy in the statements of Gerard? Because he makes some historically inaccurate statements, by the way. It's another form of enchantment. I have autofocus on, Dawn. It might have unfocused. Not much I can do until I get a better camera. I didn't get a better camera for Christmas. Did you skip the step of applying the other person's flaws to yourself? Because a lot of people talk about equality until it comes to, we'll say, the poor qualities of our fellow men and women. And they fail to say, well, that person's arrogant. How am I being arrogant? And they fail to say, well, that person has a short temper. When do I have a short temper? Oh, that person's blind to this particular thing. What am I blind to? People don't do that. They skip the step. And perspective swapping doesn't work unless you understand people have different perspectives. You can't assume somebody knows everything you know. My second talk with Grim Grizz, he just assumed a bunch of things that I knew about that I could not have known about, some of which didn't happen, by the way. They were his inferences that happened to be wrong. about all of it, hysterically enough. But he proceeded as if I knew. I had somebody recently on Twitter say, oh no, it wasn't on Twitter, it was on a live stream, say, well, you're too dumb not to understand what I'm talking about. And I'm like, dude, I've asked you 3 times for an example and 4 times to explain what you mean. Like I couldn't get any more clear. You've been able to provide 0 examples for what you're talking about, which makes me a little suspicious because I'm putting in the work. I'm asking the questions. I didn't understand what you were saying. Can you provide an example? And you didn't provide an example. Okay, let me explain this to you. That means you're wrong. That's what that means. It doesn't mean anything else ever, by the way. Because even if you are correct by accident, you're wrong. Think, why is this hard? And people just freaking blow up. The number of times that this happens to me where I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I, in good faith, say, can you give me an example, to help me understand what the hell it is you're talking about? And people don't give examples, but instead start attacking me. It's insane. And I'm like, bro, like, why don't you work with me instead of like trying to oppose me when I'm only trying to understand your damn perspective because I'm not you. And I know that. And these people always project onto me. They always do. Every single one of them. It's 100%. It's 100%. I mean, someday it won't be 100%, but right now it is. It's kind of important. I know there are exceptions to everything. I don't care about exceptions. Those happen. And we live in an imperfect world. Of course there are exceptions. But man, do not assume that you can understand somebody else's perspective. The odds of that are 0. 0. Unless they're a child under the age of 5. And you're their mother. And yes, John, it is exactly the same as empathy, which is why empathy is a bullshit idea unless you're a mother and you're talking in relation to a child under the age of 5. After that, the person develops, or roughly there, the person develops such that you, because you're one person, can't contain you and them in the same brain. I wouldn't think this would be controversial. I've been stunned at how many people don't get it. I'm like, if you claim that you can empathize with me, what you're doing is you're saying either I'm such a small person that you can fit my perspective in your head, which I assure you, you ain't doing that, no matter who the hell you think you are. Or you're saying you're such a super being that you can contain other people's perspectives in your head. No, you can't. I do not know why I would have to say this. You do not have my experience. You do not have my knowledge or information. You do not have my way of thinking. You do not have my logic, reason, rationality skills. You do not have my rhetorical skills. You don't have any of that, even in small quantities, most likely. I'm very sorry, but also, like, let's be realistic here. I have a hail of a good memory. I don't have to see things 3 times to remember them. And I've seen a lot of stuff. I don't know what to tell you. I've worked in well over a dozen different industries. Every time I get a contract, I try to learn as much about the industry as I could while I was doing the work, because normally I'm bored when I'm working because most people think that things take a very long time that take minutes for me typically. So you can't do that. Sorry. It's okay. You can sympathize with me. That's fine. That would be helpful. Right. But attacking people and telling them what they do and don't know and insisting that's just you being arrogant and imposing your idea of the world, psychologically projecting your ideas onto others. Don't do that. There's no reason to do that. Why? Just cooperate with them instead. Ugh. And that's the thing. You can't just swap perspectives. So you need something more, a little more. You need to think more about how what other people do is often what you also do, and how what they do might not match because you see the world differently. Famously in the United States, although no one understands the United States even a little bit politically because they won't do the research. Democrats believe that people need a hand up and that They need to be drawn out of poverty, and their solution is welfare programs, like checks to people, right? That's their solution. Republicans have all the same belief, except a different solution. Their solution is put them in the military. The military has brought more people out of poverty in the United States than any other thing. So the Republicans are right about that. They may be wrong about other things. I really don't care. They're definitely right about that by their numbers. And you can just look this up. Like, this is not a hidden secret. It's been known about since the 80s in terms of numbers. So I don't know what to tell you. Like, I just don't know what to tell people. Like, I don't, you didn't do the research. You skipped the steps. You heard something you liked and you went with it instead of doing your damn homework. You're lazy. I can't help you. Don't be lazy. I don't know. Or maybe just don't do that. Maybe you're not good at it. Maybe you're not good enough at researching to research those sorts of things. Don't talk about them. Don't think about them. Go grow a bean. Fix a car. Learn to sail. Do some carpentry. Build a garden. Go for a walk. I don't know. Just don't do that. You're just not good at it. It's okay. Everyone's got stuff they're not good at. They have deficits. You have deficits. We'll all live. It'll be fine. And because we're so quick to redeem people, to be equal, to raise them up inappropriately and put them in a situation they can't handle, because that happens all the time, we don't understand there's a difference between things that people do and how they act. Like, there's a difference between not saying anything and saying something and giving a warning. Those are three different things. Giving a warning might also entail making a statement, but if you jump straight to giving a warning, that might not be appropriate in some circumstances. It might be better than not saying anything, but also you might be skipping over the saying something. I usually use the formula of, are you sure about that? Or are you sure you want to do that? Or are you sure that's a wise decision? And then giving the warning. Because you want to give them a chance to come to the conclusion themselves before you bring down the authority hammer. There's a difference between offering help and doing nothing. And it tells you a lot about the other person. So if you offer somebody your notes so they don't get enchanted by listening to the thing that already enchanted them once and they turn you down, well, first of all, the odds they'll be enchanted again are very high. Not 100%. Maybe they'll get it. But also they're stubborn. They want to do things on their own. And that's fine. Like, you can do things on your own. Also, the intimacy crisis. Like, where do you think it comes from? It comes from your stubbornness, from your opponent processing, from your unwillingness to cooperate and accept help. And there's a difference between signaling and not signaling. Because if you're not signaling, signals happen when you try not to have them happen. And if you're not signaling something and someone else is, don't be surprised if the person you didn't signal to does something that you consider to be random or irrational. That might be on you, though. And also be careful what you signal. A lot of people are worried about so-called hypocrisy. A lot of what we call hypocrisy is not hypocrisy. It's proper difference due to hierarchy. Children should not have candy before dinner. Adults can. Children see this. They get upset. You need to tell them, you're a child. When you're an adult, you can do this. It is not being a hypocrite for you to tell a child not to do something that you yourself can, in fact, do. That's insane. This also applies to other people. My Uncle Jim once wanted to show me something. So he decided that he needed some gunpowder to do this. Didn't have any loose gunpowder. So he said, I have to dismantle this bullet. Go in the other room. So I went in the other room and he dismantled the bullet and got all the gunpowder out of it without making it go off and, shoot into a wall or something, which I'm sure he had mistakenly done on one occasion in the past. Uh, he had to know my Uncle Jim. He passed away some number of years ago, unfortunately, but he's an interesting person. Yeah, that was the right answer. You can't even watch me do this. Anytime you're doing something and the child is not, that the child wants to do, is that really hypocrisy? Is that how we're going to play? It's not. I'm sorry, it's not. It's proper roles and responsibilities and hierarchy in life. Same goes for lots of things. I've had a lot of people say, listen, I really want to migrate the database. And I'm like, you ain't touching the freaking database. I've seen you type. No, one keystroke, we lose the whole thing. Get out of here. That hypocritical? No, it's not. And there's a difference between offering help to people and forcing help on people. And there's a difference in just watching them struggle. As we saw with the woman who got set on fire on the train. And I'm like, okay, well, there's two appropriate things to do here. First is to get the woman on fire off of fire instead of videotaping them. And the other thing to do is to stop the fire person, which is, really easy, especially when you're behind them, by the way. I don't like everybody should take martial arts, I think, because everyone's like, oh, wow, he has fire and blah, blah. I'm like, bro, I could take him out in 4 seconds. Like, you don't even need to be in shape. Like, you get behind somebody and you can take them out really easily, any number of methods. Like, they are not a threat. They can have a gun, a knife, 2 guns, 4 knives, 6 robots, 22 aliens. Wouldn't make any difference. I'm behind you. You're down on the ground, bro. It don't take much. I can take you down 6 different ways that way, and you won't see it coming. You got no defense, technically. Sorry. And then you can run through all your excuses in your head, like, well, no, they could do this and they could do that. And then it's all bullshit. You just walk up behind somebody, boom. I've done it many times before. It's really not a problem. These things matter. And sometimes offering help is insufficient, and you actually have to help people. And this came out with Lily Phillips. I'll say it again. People were saying the 100 men shouldn't have slept with her. Obviously, this is the lowest IQ take of anything in the history of the universe. Which 100 men are you talking about? All the men? The 4 billion? In which case the patriarchy wins because they help her despite her advertising that this is what she wants to do and being willing to do it. Like, this isn't that hard. Sometimes you have to force help on people. Otherwise, the world degrades and you get, well, look around. That's what you get. Did you skip the step of reviewing the history? Most people do. They start with what they see and they logically work out from there. That's middle out thinking, by the way. I have a video on that. We denigrate time and discount it entirely. Well, has that person started a group, ripped everybody off, taken their money, and evaded the cops? And are they trying to start another group again? That might be relevant and important. Oh, they've done it 3 times, but I never bothered to look them up. Oh, flat world indeed. That happens all the time. I've seen that on the internet so often, it's obscene. What does it take to find out if someone lied? Because we skip steps and now we don't know if people are lying anymore. At first, you need to want to know if they lie. Like, a lot of people are just like, well, that person would never lie, and therefore, right? Barack Obama said something. I think the guy's name was Joe Wilson, spoke up and said, that's a lie, or you're a liar, or something like that. And everybody got on him for it. And the thing is, Obama said, you're right, I was wrong. And he apologized for saying it because it was a lie. And people yet defended Obama against something he himself said he was guilty of. You have to be willing to look for the lie, or you'll just make excuses for it. You'll skip all the steps. because it's likely that you do not want to know that they lied, because you do not want to live in a world with liars, because that might make you a liar too, or something. Or maybe you just like that person a lot. I don't know. I don't care. I'm a pragmatist. Your reasons are your reasons. I don't have access to them, and I don't want access to them. Go away. Care about your actions. That's what affects the world, not your reasoning. The reasoning doesn't affect anything. After you've established that you actually want to know if they lied, you need to see if there is a way to find out. There might not be. They might be talking about something where there's no other witness. Or maybe they're just saying, this is what I thought in my head. You can't determine the truth of the statement like that. But if there is a way, then you need to go do the research. And you need to be able to evaluate the evidence. A lot of people can't evaluate evidence. They just flat out can't. They can do the research and they just can't do anything else. Notice all of this started with a willingness to find out. Final cause matters. Make final cause great again. And the thing is, we're cooperative creatures. So it's easier to skip the work and get along. And the thing is, what most people do is they find an excuse for the lie before even determining if the lie is independently verifiable. And this is super common. Oh, he didn't know, therefore. That's BS. Ignorance is not a get out of the jail free card for lying. You could be ignorant and lie. There's no ban on that. Like that happens all the time. Most people lie through ignorance. I just don't care why you lied because I don't have access to that and I'm not particularly interested. If you lie out of ignorance, a lie still happened. And this is a rejection of reality by skipping the steps. The justification is looking towards the punishment or the repercussions and not the facts, the independently verifiable facts of the world. Scientists would refer to that as objective facts. There's no such thing. Independently verifiable is as good as it's going to get. And the fact is, the lie happened. If you want to argue that the punishment should be different based on the nature of the lie, or the reason for the lie, or the incidentals around the lie, that is fine. But first, you have to acknowledge the lie. You can't jump to the punishment phase ahead of time. And this is a step that people skip. But then we don't know reality. And why? Because we're too busy skipping the step of acknowledging reality, saying, oh, this happened, believing our observation, not inferring our observation. You don't have to infer observations. You can't infer observations. You can only create fantasies when you apply inference to the real world. And now we don't know how to find reality anymore. And people say, well, I don't know what's real anymore. Wow. When you jump directly to the step of, well, what if you found out that the whole Lily Phillips thing was AI generated and none of this ever happened? Why would you do that? What is wrong with your brain? You need help. Like, this isn't relevant to the world. And the thing is, really, most of what you see around you today is people avoiding consequence, avoiding responsibility, avoiding unpleasantness, avoiding conflict. People are skipping the verify reality step to avoid conflict. And then I don't have to hold anybody accountable for anything. And then I'm upset when someone gets set on fire and nobody does anything. Well, no one's held accountable for anything. So why shouldn't you set people on fire? I mean, seriously, like, logic it out with me. You can't, by the way, but hey, I like to win. And if you're willing to lose, let's do this. We're skipping out on the consequence of responsibility to get rid of the unpleasantness of conflict. We're just skipping steps. And we skip all kinds of steps all the time. Why is this person unhappy? Do you want to be on TV, or do you want to be like a YouTube star, or do you want to be on TV doing a show that you want to do? Do you want to be on YouTube doing the show that you want to do? Because that's going to affect what happens. Like maybe the thing you want to do, nobody wants to see. Wouldn't that suck? So that you want to be on TV, or like you want to be on YouTube, or you want to be a writer or whatever, or do you want specific things from that activity? Do you want a car to get to work, or do you want a specific brand new car? Because those are different things. When I was young, I had cars available for free at any time. I just knew a bunch of people. There were used cars everywhere. Someone would hook me up. Always had a car. And I ran through cars pretty quickly. A, I was going through free used cars, probably not in the best shape. B, hopefully this has gotten better, but may not have. I destroy cars fairly regularly because I expect a lot from my cars. I expect far less from people than I expect from my cars. So you think I expect a lot from people? Imagine how my cars have felt in the past. Do you want like an affordable house, or do you want a house in the neighborhood that you want to live in at the price you wish? Because these are really a denial of cooperation. You're skipping a bunch of steps. You're tying things together that don't belong directly tied together. It's and you're in rebellion. You just don't like the way things are. You're not willing to compromise. The number of people, especially right after the fake news virus scam, who were like, "Oh, housing's unaffordable," and I'm like, "Bro, come down here, $150,000, brand new, 2,300 square feet, acre and a half of land, 2-car garage, 22 miles from the capital city." Well, I don't want to live out there. Oh, well, then it's not an affordable housing problem. It's you're a snob problem. That's a different problem. I can't fix that. You have to fix that by getting your head out of your ass. The skipping steps. You don't want to be a YouTube star. You want to be on YouTube the way you want to be on YouTube and make ridiculous amounts of money, even though you're a completely unworthy, incompetent, useless piece of garbage. Me too, bro. Also not going to happen. Don't skip the steps. Said it before. A bunch of people used to tell me, young kids mostly online, because of course, well, I don't know what makes Elon so special. I'm as smart as him. And I would never say they weren't as smart as him because I didn't need to. I said, well, did you ever sleep under your desk at work? And they're like, well, no, I wouldn't do that. I'm like, well, Elon did. Maybe that's why you're not as successful as Elon. And at least that shut them the hell up. They didn't do their research, by the way. They skipped a step, probably a bunch of steps. Also, Elon started out with $750,000. So had I started out with $750,000, probably have done better. But I started out with betrayal. So, a little bit behind the 8 ball. I think I did okay. Let me catch up on comments because I didn't. Yes, Don, it was a good pirate Christmas. No, I did not get a parrot. Do you see a parrot, Don? You think if I had a parrot for Christmas that it would be on my shoulder, Don? Come on. I'm a little sloppy. I'm not that bad. Ixnot. People think they have individual merit. Yeah, as though that makes sense, right? It belongs to them. And that they should, and that there should be a shortcut to having authority. Yeah, or control, right? Because those aren't exactly the same thing. Ixnot. Language or communication cannot exist as a mathematical function. Exactly. And you can apply math to some of it for sure, but maybe you should never do that. Don, damn tall people, it's not fair. The hierarchy exists, Don, and you're not at the top. Fortunately, there's lots of hierarchies, as Jordan Peterson points out. T. Sanders, my music mentor would always tell me that you learn by creating/participating. You don't learn something first and then do it. Yep, that's true. Everybody misses that because they skip the step of remembering their history and where they came from, the fact that they were a baby. Do you have any arguments I've won by pointing out to people that they were once a baby and couldn't speak? Well said, Mark. Oh, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Where are we? Okay. Don, is Mark's video out of focus? Oh, yeah, I addressed that one. It's looking better. Yeah, I don't know. These cameras. This is not the, it's also 3 years old, but it's not the best camera in the world. Don, isn't understanding a person's another, yeah, I addressed this. Yeah. There's a strong faction in the corner insists that empathy isn't a thing. Empathy is not a thing. That is true. Sympathy is a thing. Empathy is something that only mothers have towards children under the age of 5. And then that fixes it, right? Because then with something that isn't, we'll say, fully manifested as a complete independent person yet, you can encompass that fully in your brain along with your own personality. Then, sure, empathy can apply. You can empathize with a dog. Sure. Dawn, I do not understand how she could just be standing there burning. How could she do that? No one has ever spoken about this. None. I heard this critique all over the place. I'm haunted by that site like an apparition. WTF. Yeah, I heard it a lot. I think part of the problem is, do they teach stop, drop, and roll in school anymore? I learned it. Do they teach it anymore? Because as part of it is, if you've never paid attention to the ways to get not on fire, you don't know what to do. And some people are very prone to freeze. So a lot of people will talk about, oh, it's fight or flight, right? Those low IQ idiots need to shut up about everything because there's no way they could have an intelligent take on anything in the world. It's at least fight, flight, or freeze. I don't know where in nature they're going, but they're very low IQ people. Like they should probably be relegated to a certain caste of society. Honestly, I don't care what your degrees are. Like this is dumb at some point. You're just retarded. And so I think a lot of people freeze. When they're in a situation where they don't know what to do, they freeze. And if you've never been pointed to a solution, like if no one's ever told you or shown you, better yet, this is what you do when you're on fire, then especially if you're prone to anxiety, which a lot of people are more after the fake news virus scam, you will freeze. And I'm sorry, Don. I was also horrified. I was more horrified by why didn't you kill the guy with the fire and push her on the ground and roll her around, right? Because, and this is where everybody gets fuzzy, right? They're like, oh, well, you can't impose on people unless it's Lily Phillips and 100 guys. But, you can't impose on people. Then the world's going to burn. No, literally, like there's an example. The world will burn one person at a time, maybe. Like it happened. How much more obvious can we make it here? It happened. It's horrific. Awakening to the Muppet Crisis. Merry Christmas, sir. What would help people evaluate evidence? All right, look. I'm just going to have to lay this out. You're a Muppet. I'm a Muppet. We're all Muppets. Almost no one can evaluate evidence, and they'll never be able to ever, no matter what you do for them. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It is literally today. Can you explain the difference between water and food versus other resources? It's like, well, no, I guess I can't. Like, holy shit. Like, I had already explained it. I had already said there is a difference between resources that you need to survive, like food and water, and other resources. And then I got that question, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this person. And he's telling me, I don't understand what you're saying. I'm like, I believe you. I also believe your IQ is 65. I don't know what to do about that. Like, why are you on Twitter? I don't understand. You shouldn't have Twitter. I'm serious. Like, you should not have Twitter. Like, if that's confusing, I got news for you. Like, there's way more confusing stuff in the world. Like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do with that? I can't help that guy. But, there are ways to evaluate evidence. First, you've got to gather it, though. Most people won't go through that step. And maybe if you can evaluate evidence, but you can't gather it, you also shouldn't be doing that. At least not alone. Like, maybe if somebody else gathers you the evidence and then you evaluate, because, like, this is part of the problem. I mean, we were just talking about this earlier on the Discord server, actually, right? Like, without other people to augment your skills, there's a bunch of things you shouldn't be allowed to do because there's holes in your skills. And you will skip steps because you're not even aware of them. It's a big problem. But yeah, I mean, it's good to know if there is evidence. This is why I always ask people for examples of what they're talking about, because that's evidence, right? And when they don't provide evidence, I just get immediately suspicious. Color me crazy, but like, if you can't provide me an example for what you're talking about, you're probably wrong about it. And to the extent you're right by accident, and I shouldn't listen to you anyway. I should discount what you say, and I do. And people get upset about that. And I'm like, but bro, you just can't do it any other way. You'll destroy the world. Look around. It's not that hard. Young God. I like this term I recently learned. Weaponized incompetence is a very old term, dude. It even has a little ring to it. Yeah. Well, yeah, people throw that around quite a bit. Useless idiots is the same concept. It's slightly different usage of the concept, but it's actually the same concept. And I mean, it's a thing that people do. Most incompetence is us weaponized against ourselves. And that's the problem. And look, I just, oh my goodness, if you guys only understood, maybe awakening to the Muppet Crisis gets most of it. But I did skip a step on purpose. I've got my Sam Pell. I've got my Muppet Cup. Have you considered? Maybe you caught it. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you caught the overall subversion of the whole stream itself, but probably not. And I've got my Table Rock tea. This is the Carolina Lapsang. It's quite good, actually. Are you kidding me? An hour and 18? How the hell did that happen? I thought it was going to be much shorter. But hey, it takes what it takes. And I never know ahead of time what it's going to take. If you want to join me, I'll post my link. Feel free to hop in. Try to pin it on navigating patterns so that you can get there that way if need be. But link should work from anywhere. And don't skip any steps. You know, put on your camera if I don't know who you are, and you keep your camera on because that's how we roll here. I know different places have different rules, but that's just the way it is. Oh, good. I heard from somebody that I didn't think I was going to hear from. I heard from a friend of mine too on Christmas. I was kind of worried about him. Oh, I forgot too. I skipped this step. We've got this. It's one of my Christmas candy things. So yeah, we've got that. We're gonna eat that later. But yeah, don't skip any steps, but do join me because that's a step. Step in cooperation. I know we had a new people last time too, right? And yeah, we get new people on Father Eric's stream. That was fun. Although that stream was a mess, especially for me. Talk about skipping steps. Like, I don't know, man. Like, just answer the question. Make a point or don't. I get so frustrated with people now. And it's gotten worse. Like, it has, like, I actually measure these things because I don't skip any steps. It actually has. If you think it's gotten, it has gotten worse, like measurably, definitely worse. A lot of things, like the number of people weighing in where they clearly don't know what they're talking about, way up. The number of people doing ad hominem attacks, way up. Number of people, even on X, even though it's gotten improved, the baseline has actually changed quite a bit. Um, which is to say, people who never did that before are now doing that. And that's a function of the anxiety and the frustration and the fact that everyone's buying into these theories. They're listening to Carl Benjamin or James Lindsay or having this big fight, or they're listening to Aaron McIntyre or Local Distance or any of these clowns. They're all wrong. They all have huge holes in their little systems and they don't see it. And fair enough. And I've tried to help most of them, but they're intransigent. And that's fine. Like whatever. I don't. The thing that people don't understand, if I do something and help you or try to help you and I fail, it's not going bad on me, but it does hurt you. But that actually puts me in an advantage. So I'm not mad. I don't care. I'll take the win. It's a double win. So like I try to help people out. They don't take the help. I like I feel bad. It's a waste of my time, I guess, kind of, but not really. And so I win. And it's a double win for me when people don't accept my help. So okay. I'm not okay. Do what you want, man. Thanks. Thanks for the hand up. Opposite of what they intend, but yeah. Damian Walters spoke up too about Peterson, I think today. It's just like poor Damian. He's another one. He's so arrogant. It's just I tried to offer him some help and he's like, "Oh, I don't understand what you're looking for from me." And I'm like, "Nothing, dude. I was offering you help, but clearly you're too stupid to see it. So that's fine. Stay in your little arrogance ivory tower and with your little group." But that's one of the things people have been missing is Jordan Peterson, like, "Well, a million's a lot of people." It's like there's 2 billion people on the internet. A million is really nothing. I've explained to people too, like, so Joe Rogan, the largest podcaster in the world, is not even known to all of the Americans that listen to podcasts and watch YouTube. Dum, dum, dum. Right. And so it's like, wait a minute. What does it mean? Well, on the internet, because it's accessible to everybody, your tiny fame is tiny because there's 2 billion people on the internet. And so you're actually not internet famous. PewDiePie is not internet famous. Not compared to 2 billion. And this is what people aren't getting. Like, no, things are not as they appear. Things need to be framed. In the frame of every person on the internet in the world, that changes everything. These numbers, the law of large numbers kicks in. These numbers don't mean what you think they mean. And a lot of things that are, quote, impressive to you are like not impressive to me. Like the number of times people have brought me technologies. Look at this. And I'm like, yeah, we had that 15 years ago. Whatever. And they're like, no, you didn't. It's brand new. And I'm like, yeah, it's really not new at all. But sure. I'm sure it's great. And then I pat them on the head and gave them a biscuit and send them on their way. And yeah, tech hasn't done anything new in so long. It almost makes me cry. Also good because we don't have anybody that can do anything new. Interestingly, I saw an article on buffer bloat, something I've talked about before. I've got some stuff on it on my private channel too, my personal channel, not my private channel. And so it's coming into the fore finally after 20 years or something. Castle,
Hey,
how are you doing, sir? It's good to see you. That's a wonderful
Doing
cup
good.
you got there, Castle.
yeah, thank you. I don't know where I found it, but oh my goodness. But yeah, I skipped the intro, so you have to let me know what we're talking about today. But
Skipping steps. You skipped the intro. You skipped the steps. Good job.
I didn't need it. No,
the arrogance. There we
the
go.
entire day I had today was the intro. So
Yeah,
it was just I have been steeped in the topic the entire day, and like actually from the very moment I woke up, the entire thing. I woke up,
Really?
turned off my alarm at 6 a.m., instantly fell asleep and woke up 35 minutes later, and that set me back for the rest of the day. like
Ouch.
actually for the rest of the day. Because that's the thing that I'm not sure if you covered this in your intro. I wouldn't know, but the thing about skipping steps is that if you actually want to do that and also stay on the time frame desired, that in order to catch up, it takes sometimes like exponentially more time to actually catch up.
That's
So
right. That's right.
what I would normally get done in that 30 minutes actually took me 3.5 hours to catch up with because I had other stuff to do at the same time. And
Yep.
then that basically set the tone for the rest of the day until I had a reprieve, and then everything is much better now. But that reprieve came at the cost of missing your intro. So, you know, so
The irony.
trade-offs as well. So it's like, but yeah, and it was interesting too because around that time I was with some people who were trying to plan some stuff that I'm working with them on this Sunday. And I was trying to get out of there, and they're like, "Oh, we need to arrange the seating and set up tables and figure out how we're going to set all the stuff up in this room." And so I wound up following them, and that took another 20 minutes or something. So I was like, I am skipping steps to not skip the steps. You know, it's just like I'm in too many arenas right now, but I can't keep
That
up with all these
happens.
steps.
That happens. Yeah, it's just I don't know. And it's weird to me because I'm like, because I see steps so clearly, especially sequential steps, and I'm like, everyone has a hard time identifying bad actors, a hard time identifying stupid people, a hard time identifying liars. And I'm like, why is this hard? This is really easy. And I explain it to them, and they're like, well, that's not definitive. And I'm like, no, actually, it is. Like, I don't know why you think it's not, but it is. It's really easy to tell. And the number of people, like, man, like, evaluate the evidence. So just to sort of go back to Awakening to the Muppet Crises, what would help people evaluate evidence? Again, looking at it, like the number of times I've told people here, if you want to know if this person is a good person or a bad person, watch this section of this video. Here's the video, here's the timestamp. And they won't do it. It's like, well, the first step is you actually have to engage with the stuff.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you don't engage, like this thing with Kale Zeldin, like, I don't know what the hell his problem is. I'm like, bro, you should come to the Discord server or watch my video, one of my videos with PVK, right? Just watch one of my videos. And he's like, well, no, I'm not going to do any of that. And it's like, I mean, like, sure, but also you're a bad actor. Like, that's bad faith. No one's trying to trick you. Or you could come on a live stream and, one-on-one, or invite me on your stream. Like, there's lots of options. You're not taking any of them. That's bad faith. I don't know what to tell you. I wish you weren't like that, I guess, but like, that's not, that's nothing to do with me. Right? Like, this isn't that hard. And everyone's like, no, you can't make that determination. I'm like, well, A, I did, so you're wrong. And B, I can, because it's 100% accurate, because there's ways to know things in the world, because reality is real. I don't know what else to say. Like, at a certain point, you just run out of, like, yeah, but this works every time. Like, I don't understand why you say I can't do something that clearly works every single freaking time. Like, I don't, and I do it. Like you can't do, no, I already did it. So obviously I can do that. I don't even know why you're saying that. People can't evaluate statements. And I'm like, I go back to grammar school. I don't know where the breakdown is for them.
Well, and that's the thing with the whole bad faith thing is you can be in bad faith and not necessarily be malicious. Like, it can just be that the faith that you're entering into might be from ignorance or whatever, but it's still bad. Like, it's not supporting the principles of whatever you're kind of engaging with. So it's like, well, and then pragmatically, it doesn't really matter at that point. We're just like, oh, well, this person's clearly, like, I see this a lot where a person says that they're going to do something and then they don't do it. And maybe it's because they just are really bad at planning, but it's just like, okay, well, I just know that I can't count on that person. They're not evil for doing that, but also, like, I can't do business with you because
that's pragmatism is worrying about end results and not worrying about interim things. So Ixnon, is spotting bad actors easy or simple? I think it's easy. I don't think it's simple. So, like, I'll just give my favorite sort of canonical example at this point. So a while back, those little cult people, they were enamored with this guy Digital Gnosis, whose name is Nathan Orman. So if you hear either of those names, it's the same referent human being or something behind them. Now, all kinds of things happened around Nathan. One of them was, at one point, he came to the Awakening from Meaning Crisis Discord server, and he crashed the after meditation. And he immediately started accusing people of being in a cult and asking them, well, what's your belief? And then, of course, back then, we had two Buddhists, an atheist, a Catholic, and a couple of agnostics in the group. And that was it. Like, there was just zero common, like no overlap. None of them had anything in common except they like to go to the meditations that Mark Emanuel ran, right? Okay, cool. Right? They all like Vervaeke's work. And so he's on a crusade to save people from cults. And then if you understand his backstory, which, is always helpful to understand with these people, he felt like he was in a cult. He got caught in some form of Christian fundamentalism and got himself out. And so now he's an atheist, and he's basically going after anybody who doesn't realize they were in a cult, like Christianity or something banal, and tries to get them out. Like, that's his mission. It's stated mission too. Like, it's not hard to figure out. Like, he does say this. So Vervaeke, like a year later, went and did a talk with him based on a Twitter conversation that they had back and forth or something. And I was kind of like, bro, you could have just asked me. Like, we know him. He was maybe the first or second person to ever get thrown off of that Discord server, because the person who ran the Discord server is weak, unleaderly piece of garbage who could not be convinced that people lied about things, even when presented with textual evidence. Here's this person saying something the opposite of this person. Like, that didn't work, right? And so what had happened was Nathan actually got himself thrown off because he pissed off enough people on the server quickly enough, which I just thought was amazing. And subsequently, he went over to Vanderklay's little BOM garbage, and I think he got himself thrown off BOM by Joey, of course, because Joey knows how to draw hard lines, and he's nothing but a disruptor. And he got to talk to Paul at least once, I think. But at one point, Jacob was all like, oh, look at this Nathan Orman guy. And I'm like, Jacob, bro, this is on a live stream somewhere. I don't know how long ago it was. It's quite a while ago. I'm like, Jacob, bro, go look at his channel, okay? And just look at the video titles. He specializes in anger and resentment porn. That's what he does. He makes videos about his anger and resentment and monetizes them. And he's been very successful, or had been at that point on YouTube. Whatever. Fine. I'm not here to fix the world. And Jacob, because Jacob is awesome at some things, he's wrong about a bunch of stuff, but whatever. He went and looked. And he actually took the time, and he didn't take a lot of time either, because he's a little impatient. He's not as cautious as some people are. But he looked and he said, oh, you're right. Oh my God, look at these, just the titles of the videos would have told you everything you needed to know. And then he tried to tell Paul, don't talk to this guy. He's a bad faith actor. Of course he was, because he specialized in anger and resentment porn. So then Vervaeke gets him months later. And, people are asking me about him, and I'm like, look, the guy is mentally ill. I don't know what to tell you. No, you can't say that. And I'm like, what? I have evidence. What do you want me to do? Lie to you? I can show you in his videos him being disconnected from reality in the moment. What? I don't understand what your standard of evidence is, but he's clearly got a mental illness, which, by the way, had you done your research, because I did mine, you would know, because he talked about how he previously had a mental break. So the question of whether or not he's mentally ill is answered by him, not me. I'm just repeating the information he's put out on the internet, which you were too lazy to look up. And so what ended up happening was he does this talk with Vervaeke. It's 100% bad faith because he's never engaged with any of Vervaeke's work. He never read a single paper by Vervaeke. He didn't watch Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. He didn't know any of the work. Any of it. And I'm like, well, obviously then he was in bad faith. And everyone's like, you could have known that in advance. And I'm like, I did. I told you how I knew it. And had you done half as much work as I did, you would know that I was right. But you're lazy and you just want to redeem people. And you're skipping all the steps, which is the work. You got to put in the work. I put in the work. I also had insider information. Like, this guy's off the scale crazy, right? Like, at one point, so it had been at least a year since he gotten thrown off of AftMC. And Cassidy went on one of his live streams to try and explain some Christian-y stuff to him for whatever reason. I don't remember. It was too long ago. And she was just, talking very high level, like, this is what liturgy is. It's not, it's not optional. Everybody has a liturgy. You have to live, right? And somehow he brings me up. I haven't even talked to him in a year. He brings me up and he starts going off about me. And Cassidy's like, well, I mean, I know who Mark is, but like, whatever. Like, I don't know why you brought him up. So a year later, he's still thinking about me in his head. I mean, that's a mental illness. I'm sorry. I had one interaction with the guy. I didn't kick him off the server. I didn't have the power to do that at any time. And like, yeah, he's mentally ill. Why don't you know this? Did you look at his YouTube channel? It's all anger and resentment. Dawn, I watched Nathan's conversation with CW Weeks on CW's channel and thought maybe people had judged him too harshly. I then went to Nathan's channel and saw an entirely different person. Right. Well, and PDK, this is what pisses me off about Vander Turkey. He had him in an estuary in England. The guy sat in the corner and didn't say a freaking word, and then got online immediately and started criticizing the whole event. And Paul just blew it off like, ha, ha, ha. And I'm like, bro, like, you should tell people, right? Back to Awakening to the Muppet Crisis's question. This is how you know someone's a bad faith actor. This is how you evaluate evidence. Does Paul do that? No, he just blows it off. Like, it's nothing. It's not nothing. Now people don't know how to identify bad actors because of that stupid garbage. You're making the world worse. Please stop making the world worse. Please, please, please. It's not that hard. Like, holy crap. I could go on. That's one example from one person. Granted, it's especially destructive. But still, that's one example. And I didn't even go through all my evidence. This is all on video. It's nothing I made up. See what this is all the BOM people are famous for this. Famous. Well, you can't say he's mentally ill. And of course, it's me, right? So I'm like, how long did you talk to him for? Like, how many times have you talked to him? And they'd be like, well, 3 or 4. And I'm like, well, did you talk to him for like 5 minutes? Oh, like 10 minutes. And I'm like, all right, but I've talked to this person like more than 20 times for hours. Right? So I'm just warning them up front. Like, it's possible that I have way more information than you do about this person. And they're like, and then they double down. Well, you can't say he's mentally. He told me he was mentally ill. He told me what he was diagnosed with. He told me what psychiatrist he went to, and he gave me a list of his medications for real. Like, that happened with 3 different people, by the way. And I'm like, I don't know why you guys think I can't know things about people when they tell me all the details. But also, you're wrong about everything you've ever thought in your life, probably. This is my problem with the BOMers. Is, they go out on their little freaking live streams like last week, and they make fun of the midwits. And I'm like, you guys would be lucky to be midwits. That would be a huge upgrade for you. And I'm serious. Like, these are not smart people. Except for Vanderclay. Vanderclay is very smart. He's just not using his smartness for goodness, unfortunately. Different problem. That's just one small example that's recent. I've been on the internet a long time. These are very familiar patterns. This happens all the time with the internet. in all kinds of groups you'll never even know existed. All right, Castle, take it away before I lose my mind.
I was just thinking about Christopher's question about it being easy or simple. I mean, that is one of the things. It's not, simple is one fold. So yeah, there's not like a single one and done sort of way of doing it, but there's lots of these little subtle things that you can kind of pick up just by paying attention. And I think that's one of those things that you can kind of, especially if you have a sort of example that you're looking at, that you can kind of cross-reference and be like, one of those little like the color swatches at Home Depot or something like that, or it's just like, is it this, or is it not? Is it not this? And then you can kind of tell. But yeah, it does require putting in the work, but the work is generally not hard. Like, I mean, I had told you yesterday about the thing where there were all these news things reporting on this event, saying all kinds of stuff, and it's so ominous and all these things. And then you go and you just pull up the actual 2.5 hour live stream and just skip up to it. And it's just like, they hadn't turned the lights on yet. And that's when they took the screenshot. And it's just like, it's just like, it's sad. But you can tell that these people, it doesn't matter if they were incompetent journalists or not. The fact is they put out that signal. I think one thing that I kind of caught, because I missed the intro, but I didn't miss all of the monologue, was that the thing about, if you're not putting out the signal, but there is someone that is putting out the signal, like that's the signal that's getting out. And so, that's the challenging thing there, is if you get a bunch of people, even if they're all incompetent, and maybe they're actually just plagiarizing each other, and it was just one person put the signal and everyone else is just boosting it. It's like those are the loudest ones. They're the only ones doing it.
That's actually the problem of today. So this is why people like Girard, because he's talking about the two things that no one's discussing. The most important thing is mimicry. No one is discussing mimicry and its role in society. They'll talk about zombies, they'll talk about LARPing, and they'll talk about NPCs. Okay, what do those three things have in common? This is what you missed in the monologue. Mimicry. Those are all forms of mimicry, forms or manifestations of mimicry. That's why Girard's important. Now, he lies about mimicry, by the way, completely, and ties it into scapegoat. And he's describing sacrifice, calling it scapegoat, tying it into mimicry, which it most certainly, those two things are not tied together in the way that he suggests at all. And there was a Father Eric stream a while back, 3 weeks ago, maybe last month, where Father Eric gave a brilliant summary, actually, of some of the things I told them about Girard, because I have notes. Unlike some people who apparently listened to the same David Cayley interview, took no notes, and didn't realize I was practically quoting Girard and trying to make an excuse, right? Like, no, that's not how that works. Sorry. Like, you want to go up against somebody, that's fine. I'm not the guy. Don't go up against me. You're not going to win. It's not going to happen. I'm very careful, super precise, and I do my freaking work. I do a lot of work, right? Just look at my comments on Vander Turkey's channel, although I haven't made any in months, but like that takes a lot of work. It's not easy, right? These ideas aren't discussed. He's the only one discussing them. And so people want more. And I agree that should be better discussed, just not by him. Fortunately, he's dead, but his books live on. Maybe they should all be burnt. And we should start over. Because, like one person's signal gets out there, and if that's a bad person, a bunch of people are going to mimic or echo or mirror that signal. That's going to happen. And then a very loud voice will appear as a result. And that could be the result of you not putting out a better signal. And then you would be partially responsible for that. And no one likes that answer. I get that. Also, that's the answer. So you better figure it out. This is part of what I call the recession of the church, right? If they're not out there exemplifying beauty and truth and goodness, then somebody will exemplify those things in some way. It might not be towards the beautiful, the true, and the good, though. signals are signals, man, and people read them the way they read them. And that's the core problem.
Yeah. I mean, just within the last couple of months, like I won't even cite the details of the examples, but like exactly what you said, that there is a vacuum being occupied. The people who could be putting out the signals, granted they're at a disadvantage, but they could be putting out the signals. They're there.
Yeah.
And these are not necessarily like, I'm not even referring to clergy per se, but like laity, like just people that are physically there, that are in positions where they can actually do something. And not anything radical, like not doing some big march or something like that, just exemplifying, just by their life, you know, and that they could do that. And yet they're not only not showing up to their own stuff, which is fascinating, but because I did see this, and I'm going to kind of bring the heat to to a couple of them actually when they become available. Just kind of pointing out, like, hey, your organization's name was on this. Where were you? You know, and that, but having that, and then knowing that within the same week or two, there was some insane, like, immoral behavior that was being publicly done that was completely counter to the message that they should have been doing. And it was sanctioned by the overarching authorities that are, you know, like the secular overarching authorities allowed a big event to happen and promoted all kinds of gross stuff. And it's just like, you guys should have been actually doing anything, like not just crashing the party, but like you guys should have been doing stuff beforehand. And then when you guys had stuff afterwards, you should have shown up. Like that's kind of the thing that's been frustrating me a bit. And I'm working on trying to like light people up, whether or not that means, you know, setting them alight for, you know, enthusiasm or just lighting them up in terms of reprimanding them. Either one is fine at this point, but I mean, somebody's got to do it. But just saying that it's also that no one is making the signal. Like they're not even, you know, and to the point of the amplification, like you can be small and you just get a few other people to start, you know, mimicking. And it's like, that's a lot of times enough, because to the point of people not putting in the work, it's actually very likely that the people that you're going against, who are competing against you, are actually lazy or incompetent. And they just don't have any opposition. Like, not opposition, but they are opposing something that isn't standing upright. You know, if you just actually did your job and did the thing that you claim to be doing, or should be doing, or are growing into the position to be doing, or something like that. Maybe it's not possible yet. But at least, you know, if you're doing that, you'll make it a whole lot harder for them, at least. Because I see so many people who are paid to do stuff. And, you know, like your old point that you used to make was, you know, that you can pay caring people, but you can't pay people to care. And it's like, even like the bad actors, like you can't pay them to care about their own bad actions a lot of the time. Even when they are malicious, they're actually that lazy. And maybe the fact that they're malicious is because they're taking the easy route, you know. So it's like you can pull them over. It's not that hard.
Well, that's like the weakness as evil.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I'm told by reliable sources is actually all over the Bible. It's just nobody mentions it or something. I haven't read that book too long, did not read. But like apparently that, I mean, I know it's in some stories for sure. Like this is why you shouldn't raise up the weak, because they're more prone to evil. It's not because they're evil. It's they're more prone to evil and promulgating evil than stronger people. It's why hierarchy exists. And you know, like a lot of people just want to redeem and raise people up for no reason. And it makes the world instantly worse. And on God, what if I just don't want to put out signals because your calculation is that putting out signals is a mistake? You don't know what
that is a signal. I think, like, even
you're not getting around putting out signal.
Yeah.
The fact that you don't put them out deliberately means that there are still signals there, and you're responsible at that point. So, like, whatever. Do you want to be responsible for something you did, or do you want to be responsible because you did nothing? That's really the question, right? And this is why people argue about free will. Like, this is actually what they're complaining about in all cases. They're complaining about the fact that they don't have the option to not do something and maintain irresponsible irresponsibility or lack of responsibility. Yeah, you don't. That's right. You don't have that option. Rush. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. Right. That is, yes, technically true. It's not an option that you have. Right. The responsibility is still there. Now, again, in these interactions, I always ask questions. I always offer, would you like to engage? Right. And then if they refuse, I'm off the hook. Their bad behavior belongs to them entirely, and I didn't contribute to it or make it worse. But I did try to make it better. I'm off the hook.
Yeah.
If they make themselves worse, I'm better by default. I win. If they engage, I win. It's a no-lose situation for Mark. He really doesn't care. He's kind of happy about the situation, even though it's disappointing when people don't engage. Especially when, these notes could help you save you from an enchantment that you've already fallen for. Hey, man, if you don't want them, that makes me sad, but point to me. I'll take the win. It's not. The only people that don't put out signals are dead. Yeah, that's more true.
Well,
but it's more about responsibility, right? So you can look at the woman on fire and say, here is a guy taking a video of a man committing a crime and a victim, when instead he could be fixing that situation for one or both of them. Easily. He doesn't even tell her stop, drop, and roll. Why not, bro? And maybe he doesn't know that either. That's fair, but also, that's weakness improving evil. Because if that happened and there was no video, that's better. Right? But now there's a video, which means he put his time, energy, and attention into spreading the evil out over the internet.
Yeah. And then people are putting their time, energy, and attention into consuming it.
Well, they have to.
Yeah. Because it's just being shoved right in their face.
No. You need to pay attention to negative signal. You don't need to pay attention to positive signal. I don't know where people get that from. I'm like, dude, first of all, if you understand even the child's version of evolution, you should have figured out, by sheer inference in about 4 seconds, that this is true. You don't need positive feedback at all. B.F. Skinner just had it completely ass backwards, and he's a dumbass. And had you done your research on B.F. Skinner, you would know that, because every time he tried to do the experiment to prove his thesis, it failed. That should have been a hint. These people skip steps. The B.F. Skinner utopia. B.F. Skinner had a lot of good ideas. Change psychology, as reprehensible as it is, for the better, maybe, if there's any redeeming quality in psychology, which there may not be. Different problem, different live stream, right? But this isn't that hard. If evolution is true at all, even a little bit, then you need negative signal and you don't need positive signal. And therefore, you should always prefer to pay attention to negative signal, because negative signal is the thing that might kill you. And you don't need positive signal to live. You just need no negative signal. That's why duality, binary thinking, listing two things, these people are lost. They can never map the world for you in a useful fashion for a reasonable period of time. Dawn, it's the things like the burning women that make me feel like the devil is winning. He is. He's walking around. It's been going on for a while, even though Jesus said he won't. Well, look, ultimately he said he won't. He didn't say in the meantime he wouldn't. In fact, he said quite the opposite, unless the stories I've told about Revelation are completely backwards. But I don't think they are. So
the other thing too is the fact that it was something that kind of came up. I think it was the letter of Peter or something like that, where he says if you resist him, then he flees. But it's just who is resisting? You're not resisting if you're just taking a video. In fact, you're amplifying. That's right. I was thinking about the thing that my dude Ixnot here said about the only people that don't put out signals are dead. I do want to just kind of push back on that slightly. Evolutionarily, if a dude just died in front of you, that's a pretty strong negative signal. Especially if he was doing something that you could maybe choose not to do. But also, I mean, you take stuff like people still mimicking Gerard and all that stuff. I mean, I guess all of that just to say that the not putting out signals at all intentionally is worse than being a corpse. Because
Right.
even they put out some sort of signal,
Well, and you have a responsibility as a result of having been thrown into the Heidegger's. The only worse than Heidegger is the fact that anybody took anything he said seriously. I'm like, really? You couldn't do the research to find out he became a Nazi and then take the hint that maybe if you become a Nazi, your philosophy is evil. Is that too much of a logical leap for people? I don't. Thrownness is about the dumbest idea I've ever heard of. Like, I mean, him and Hegel, man, they're like in a competition for retard of the universe of all time. I mean, at least Nietzsche had some intelligent things to say. Hegel and Heidegger? Really? Anyway. And John, contributes to my ongoing anxiety. Well, look, that's the goal. Like, evil wins. I'm sorry, Don. But also, and we had this conversation with Sandy on the Discord the other day, like, don't pay attention to that stuff. Don't pay attention to that stuff. I know it's hard to do, but like, you just got to isolate, not watch the news of any kind from any source.
Yeah. Well, that's the big part of like kind of offsetting this stuff with sacrifice, is that I have cut out so much stuff. Like, most of the time when people tell me about things going on and people that like, I'm just there like, sure, I know some of these words, like I don't actually know what's going on most of the time, and I'm getting stuff done all day long. And like, it's actually a superpower. Like, I jokingly tell, I was at this business meeting, and I have jokingly told somebody that ignorance is my superpower, because it's like, it really just eliminating the amount of distractions is just such an enormous thing. And then also, like, never tell me the odds. You have all these signals going out and people say, oh, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. If I didn't hear that, like, maybe it's actually not true. Maybe they actually believed it, but maybe also they're lying deliberately. Like, that type of, both of those things happen all the time. And maybe it's not possible within a certain set of constraints or something like that. But it's just like,
Right.
if I didn't know any of that stuff, then, and maybe it's not possible for me, but maybe I know the guy that can do it. So it's like, it's not actually that big of a deal. And then you just go off and do the thing. And then it's like, oh, it's done. Like, the impossible thing is done, but I didn't know it was impossible. You just do it. Like, it wasn't even some impressive feat. It's just people just said that you couldn't do it.
Well, and they couldn't do it because they couldn't see it, because we all have different perspectives on the world.
Yeah.
And we try to cast those perspectives out, right? And yeah, I mean, look at my second talk with Grim Grizz. You'll see Grim Grizz flat out telling me I'm lying because I must know this thing that, even had it been true, there's no possible way that I could have had and known it. I didn't have access to it. Right? And B, it wasn't even true. None of it. He just imagined, he didn't imagine it, but like, he misunderstood and thought someone was someone else, and then filled in a bunch of blanks, and it was all fantasy. And I'm like, and he rage quit his own stream ultimately. Like, he kicked me off first, but then he actually rage quit his own stream, and I was like, dude, what's wrong with you? And I felt bad, and I've met him in person since then. I mean, whatever, but also super dramatic, most dramatic, over dramatic person I've ever actually been in person with. Like, bro, no one cares, no one's watching. So, young guy, everything smells, everything black body radiates, everything has a signal. Ma, what? Yeah, you're in the world, dude. Like, that happened to you. Happened to me too. Is this why Agent Smith hated the smell? Probably, yeah, he didn't want to be reminded of what was there, of the imperfection of the world. I mean, it's just, the Matrix is just Gnosticism. It's really not that hard. Your signal is the best. Thanks. Nice. I hope it's good enough. I don't know about the rest. Ixanon. Also, skipping steps. I think that's why Jonathan Michaud is saying go to church is insufficient, even though it's correct. Yeah, thank you, Ixon. Yeah, it's totally insufficient because he's skipping too many steps. And that is, I mean, that's the thesis of the navigating patterns and the Mark of Wisdom cruise ideas around this, is that you need the poetic way of informing the world. Otherwise, going to church absolutely won't work. It just flat out will not function at all. It's just not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen.
The amount of repairs I needed to just start going back was like years of, and even knowing that like it, past a certain point, it's like, yeah, this is eventually going to happen. Still took like a year and a half, something like that, you know. And then even when I started getting serious, and then also I realized that just showing up wasn't enough. And it's just like, oh, you start, it's like, oh, that wasn't, it wasn't actually, oh, you reached the end goal and then nice, you did it. It's like, actually, no. And it's not just the, oh, now you got to do it next week and next week and next week or any of that stuff. But it's like, oh, actually, that's the minimum. Like,
right.
You know, and there is, yeah. So you end up in this whole thing where then you've got, you know, the difference between, you got the people that go on Sunday every week for, you know, 60 years or something like that, but then they never spend 5 minutes, you know, a month praying or something like that. And then you get these people who are like, oh, you know, the Nazis occupied Poland and this lady was in the basement and there was the one building they never watched and she couldn't leave the building or whatever. And she ascended through the, you know, 4 billion levels of spiritual you know, advancement or something like that in a basement in like 6 months or something like that. It's just like, well, the going to church thing she would have killed to be able to do that, but also like there's the fact that she didn't have that access made a huge difference. But then also, you know, it's like the people that were going that outright say that's not enough. Like right. I was telling, I forgot who. No, I was telling my mom because I brought up. She brought up the thing with all those crazy people reporting that stuff, and then I mentioned something about there was this guy Saint Leonard of Port Maurice, that this guy would like, he would deliver sermons that would just cut right through somebody's soul. You know, it's just like, because he would put out the signal and everything, and he would preach to people that were like common church going people. And he actually went, he was like, all of you guys who like, you know who you are and you're doing all the stuff that I'm about to bring up, you can just leave. Because he's like, it's going to get bad. And then he goes on and he actually tells these people, if you're going to keep living like this, and again, they're going to church every week. He said, if you guys are going to keep going like this, you better figure out a way to wash off your baptismal seal. He was like, he basically made the analogy that it's like going to maximum security prison with the word police tattooed on your forehead. And he's just like, you guys better start like acting the way that you're supposed to. You better start putting out the signals that you're supposed to be putting out. And you know, otherwise it's just like there's a judgment on that. Like there's the same way with this guy with the phone that is recording the thing. It's like there's an enormous judgment that gets put on that guy. Just from the outside observer, just recognize that like, oh wait, this guy isn't doing anything. And he's amplifying the evil signal too, just by his inaction.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that's part of, you know, when Jordan Peterson says maybe everything you do matters. Yeah, because it's all signal or lack thereof. And so yes. And if you just apply that like 1 or 2 layers up, you come to, you know, some really important conclusions about what's going on. And yeah, I mean, this is why it's important to signal clearly, right? To know what you're signaling, signal it deliberately, and signal it clearly. Like you're better off signaling a bad message clearly and knowingly than anything else. Like, except a good message. and that's the problem. Like it's there whether you want it to be or not. And there's so much confusion around this tech bro versus MAGA. I'm like, the guys you're calling MAGA came into what you call MAGA via Elon Musk. So are they tech bros or MAGA? And who are the MAGA people? Like, I don't understand. Like, at some point, I'm just confused as to what you're talking about. And, H-1B visa and stealing jobs and blah, blah, blah. And then no one understands what anybody's saying. And, well, Carl Benjamin actually did understand part of the point, but he's just framing binary. So he just didn't understand. Plus, he's not here. He doesn't understand how any of this works here. It's like watch The End of Civilization by Jonathan Blow on YouTube, and then you'll kind of understand. Like, maybe we hired all these Indian developers and they all suck, and now we have terrible software. I don't know. Yeah, and I don't know what else. Like, I was there. I watch it. Like, yes, that happened. It happened exactly that way, by the way. So I don't know. I don't know. You may be thinking you're getting better people, but you're not.
Yeah, and it's the peripheral cost too. Like, so I watched this recently there was a client company that outsourced, for some reason, they outsourced a portion of their call center. I don't like it.
What?
So,
how does that work?
This actually happened, I think, with two separate clients, and they're like big corporations. And so one of them outsourced a portion of their call center to South Africa, and then another client outsourced theirs to somewhere in South America. And troubleshooting their tech issues is so much harder when you're in South Africa and the people trying to fix that are in Ohio. It's like, I mean, a lot of them, they're used to remote troubleshooting and stuff, but then you introduce language barrier, and like, these people are, you're dealing with someone who is in a completely different country, and then you have the technician has, stayed in around their area in Ohio for their entire life. And it's just like, they don't have that kind of experience to be able to interpret. And then you're dealing with perhaps unusual equipment as well, because you can't guarantee that the type of, laptops that they have are exactly the same as all the other stuff that you're running. So it's like, it's a whole thing. But yeah. But there's also, I mean, there's more of the skipping step stuff where it's just, oh, we're just going to get people, right? And it's just like, well, we're also not going to establish an entire office building that has, IT built up from the ground up. And it's like, we're not going to send one of our guys from Michigan over to South Africa to set up your office. I'm sorry. Like, it's just not going to happen. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it's so remarkable because people skip steps. They just don't know how to understand the world. And some of it's involuntary. I mean, number of movies and books that just move the timeline around for no good effect. And I'm like, you are destroying people's ability to discern reality. No, really. Like, please don't ever do that. Because people get these fans, and you see it all the time. People are like, well, this person would have known blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, literally that happened later in time. There's actually no way they could have known that. It's not even possible. And people just think it is possible because they're so used to the flipping timeline bullshit. They're so used to it that they think it's real. And I'm like, that's anti-reality. It's total fantasy. Father Eric, good to see you, sir. The time shifts are the worst. Yeah, I mean, people whine about time travel. I'm like, let's just have a consistent in time timeline so that people know how to do sequencing. Because when you don't understand sequencing, you think contradiction is perfectly okay. They're like, oh no, the paradox is good because Hegel. And I'm like, well, Hegel was retarded, but he wasn't that retarded. But also, that isn't what he said. But also, he's still wrong. Like, you're wrong 3 ways to Sunday. No. Contradiction is the indication of a limitation of your thought. Period. End of statement. Or a limitation of the frame that you're in. End of statement. Was it Mino's paradox? You can't touch the wall ever. You can never reach the wall. Yes, if you use logic, reason, rationality, if you use measurement, you cannot reach a wall. That is true. You cannot physically come in contact with it. That is true. That just says logic, reason, rationality aren't sufficient to describe the world. That's all that says, and that's a good thing to know. It doesn't mean Mino's right and there's an existential crisis. It means that frame doesn't cover this condition. Good to know, bro. Therefore, their frame has a limit. Good to know. Don't pass that limit. Lizard Girl, good to see you. I don't think I've seen you on the live streams. You been on the live streams? If you have, it's been a very long time. Skipping steps. You can call it the underpants gnome effect. I suppose. I'd rather just call it skipping steps. I don't know. Father, nah, dude, nothing ever happened. All change is an illusion. That's also true. or as I like to say to Sally Joe, existence doesn't exist and reality isn't real. Solved it. Like, it's because that's where their arguments end.
Yeah.
And they don't see it. I'm like, oh my God, because they don't understand sequence. They can't actually follow a thread. Then this guy is. You can go on Twitter and look. The guy actually said, after I told him, water and food are resources that have nothing to do with mimicry because you need them to survive. And then he actually said, after that, I don't understand why you think water and food are different from other resources. And I'm just like, can you not follow a sequential thread of thought? Because apparently he can't. And I just felt so, and he kept telling me, like, I don't understand you. And I'm like, then maybe you can't understand anything at all ever. No disrespect, but also there are people like that. You might be one of them. I don't know. I strongly suspect, though. It's very sad. Also hysterically funny. It's not. Zeno's paradox. Oh yeah, reachability is a quality, right? It's Zeno, not Meno. Zeno, Meno. You know what? These stupid Greeks need better names. That's how to solve that. This is a girl from South Park. I haven't seen all of South Park, although South Park is quite funny. Funny story. You won't believe me. It's fine. I don't care. 2 years before South Park came on air, I said, you know what? I can't draw, but you know what? You could make a cartoon with terrible drawings and terrible animation. And as long as the dialogue was funny, people would buy into it. And I thought about it for a while. I was like, I could do that in my quote spirit, which I didn't have any of because I slept 4 hours a night and worked for 20. Bang, 100%. Boom, just right at the wall. All obstacles destroyed. I was a force of nature. Actually, that's not true. The forces of nature learned to be that way from me. It's a true fact. And so I didn't pursue it. And then like 2 years later, South Park came out. I said, I was right. I was totally right. You could get away with that. It's the writing that matters. And that's like the storytelling matters. So what do we see now with Critical Drinker and those guys? When did the first episode of South Park come out? So we're talking about a big time frame here, right? Oh, I know. They talk about all of these other elements of the movie are either okay or really good, but the storytelling sucks and therefore it's a terrible movie. That's basically the theme of everything Critical Drinker's been doing for the past year and a half, 2 years anyway. Was it 98? All right. Thank you, Father. Yeah. So in 1996, 2 years before South Park came out. Yeah, it was right after. Yeah, it was right after I got my house. Yeah. I was just in my house for like a year or something. Or maybe it was that year. Whatever. I remember it because I was in the basement at the baker's rack setting it up. I still have that baker's rack. It's in my shed. It's in my shed right there. Right there. On the other side of that wall. Well, and across the yard, but whatever. Yeah, I was right in front of the baker's rack. I forget what the hell I was doing. You got to understand, I ended up with 50 computers in the basement. I had 3 built benches to bench computers. That was just in the basement. And then upstairs, I had 8 machines in the upstairs office. So, I mean, a few of them are utility machines, right? They're not full use or anything crazy. Like I had one machine that just burned CDs and DVDs and stuff for me on a web interface. You didn't need a monitor. You just kind of use it on the web. And I'd said all that. People are like, "Whoa, we can remote boot our machines." I'm like, okay, listen. We were doing no hard drive computers, that would just boot off the network with no drives at all on a token ring network in 91. So I don't want to hear about you just discovered you could boot a computer off the network, baby steps. I'm just not into. And we were assigning IP addresses with RARP. I think it's called QoS or ROS. It was a custom build. I think it's still around, actually. Yeah, it's probably like 30 years old or something crazy. Yeah, I've done all this stuff. Like I cut my teeth and all that nonsense. I've been around for, was there 3 remote boot protocols? The latest is Pixie, I think. Pixie is the big popular one. There's others. But yeah, I knew all about RARP. People are like, RARP? I'm like, yeah, I have IP addresses on the internet too. Like, what else would you like to know? Nobody does their research, so they don't know that. You can look me up with Aaron. You can find out I have IP addresses. Yeah, nobody does the research. It's fine. It's fine. But can it run correct? Oh, yeah. How well does it run Doom? I've been watching some of the retro channels. It's just a riot to watch these things because they're like, well, I ran into this problem, and I'm like, yeah, it's this. And an hour later they figure it out, and I'm like, dude, you could have just asked me. Troubleshooting is easy. I don't know why you guys. And they're getting out oscilloscopes and all this. And I'm like, nah, it's this. And I'm just like, what? Yeah, it's funny to watch because I grew up on that. I'm like, no, I know what this is. I know how this works. People that were there knew. And sometimes it's like Adrian's Digital Basement. I watch him, and I mean, I really like Adrian. He's a nice guy, but my God, his troubleshooting skills are awful. They're way better than average. Just from my perspective, I'm like, bro, you're making such basic mistakes. You need to stop. This is painful. And I still watch it. He introduces me to some great tech, but he was around. I'm like, bro, you should know this. You were there. How do you not know this? You were there. So yeah, it's completely crazy.
But yeah.
See what Ixnon? Why run Crisis when you can run Doom? Doom is the benchmark. Can I make it run Doom? I was playing that. Can I make it run Doom game for a while, right? Because will it run on an Amiga? Will it run on a stock Amiga? All that nonsense. I got to get my Amigas out of the shed one of these days and start playing with them. But we're ways from that. Someday.
See, if you could run Crisis 3 without any drives and then play it without a monitor, I think that would generate enormous publicity for your tech channel.
There you go. No,
I'd watch it. We couldn't see you playing it, right? It would just be you without a monitor, but we'd have to trust that you had done it.
I don't think I've ever played Crisis. No, I'm going to rebuild the 1108 on my other channel. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with it or if it doesn't work even, but I've got my Deoxit. I knew about Deoxit before I watched Adrian's Digital Basement. He's a big Deoxit fan. There was a retro guy who ran Doom dual monitor on original hardware. And you had to do all kinds of special things. And I love it when people struggle with like NDIS drivers. I'm like, oh my God, dude, I'm like an NDIS driver expert. Like, just what are you doing? I always watch them like, why are you struggling with this? NDIS is easy. I was there 10,000 years ago, Castle. And yeah, I'm like, why are people struggling with this? But he got it to work, and he had to downgrade the version of Doom. But then he played it on a dual monitor. It was dual monitor over the network or something. So like, yeah, you couldn't put 2 monitors on the same machine with a 46, whatever the hell he was using. But you could use a monitor on a networked machine over the network and have 2 console views. I forget what the console views are called in Doom, but he actually did it. And I was like, oh, that's actually cool. He was pretty good, actually. He knew what he was doing, kind of. Like I said, he screwed up the NDIS drivers. I was like, this is so easy. You just got to do it. Like, what are you doing? Why is this hard?
Man. But there's Father.
And what are those channels? What are those channels? What are I repaired my old, 46, or like, there's just one guy, I think he's in Dubai. It's called like Bits and Bolts. So I just discovered this one, and I really got to stop watching this stuff. I got to get back on other things, but it hasn't been distracting me from the book, I promise. But no, it really hasn't. But I think he's in Dubai, and he just buys old boards and stuff that he thinks is valuable, and he rebuilds stuff. What is that? What is Adrian's digital business? What are these retro guys? They're showing you all the steps to get from point A to point B. And so unconsciously, we know we're missing steps. We know things are missing. And these people are actually giving you the steps back for real, which is good, right? So we know we have a hunger for this.
Yeah. I think about even just kind of like the really simple stuff, like those guys that go and they take, I saw one where it was this dude found a pair of shoes that were just lodged in just a wall of mud or something like that. And he goes and climbs his way over and extracts these shoes out of the mud and everything, and then goes and restores them. And they were it turns out that they were solid white, and that they were just, at the end of it, they were just brand new, totally clean. He even does repairs on them and everything like that. And I saw that a while ago, and it's just oh my gosh. But I think there is something to that. And those guys on Vietnam that go and they just build the underground huts and stuff like that in one day with some sticks. And it's just everyone wants to see the process, that. And a lot of times you just skip to the end. But I mean, there is something really satisfying about seeing them go and actually do every little thing.
Yes. Well, I've got some theories. For example, one of my, we'll say, crazier theories is that we actually should ban lathes from YouTube, because I could watch a lathe all day, all day. As a guy, you can just watch lathes. That would be fine. That'd be great. You should watch a lathe. That's fantastic. Yeah. Or wood turning, or any of those things. They're fun to watch. It's just ooh, because you see things get built from the ground up. But I think in the quote modern world, or in the age of gnosis, everyone's skipping steps. They're reading books instead of learning about life by doing, right? They're skipping to the end. They're well, I want to know how to garden. It's yeah, but you actually have to just have a garden for a couple of years. You can't actually learn it from a book, you idiot. You can learn how to mostly avoid most mistakes, maybe, but no. And that's the problem. Father Eric, no man will ever tire of building and progress. Yeah, well, seeing things unfold, particularly in steps. Critical Drinker goes through his movie reviews in steps. Unlike some of his movie review partners, some of them may have more viewers on their channel, I don't know. But he goes through it in steps and breaks things down and says, this is good, but this is bad, and this is good, right? In steps. And that's building in progress. I mean, even though you're, quote, deconstructing, which is an invalid term. Retro console mods, too. Yeah, it's the same thing. I think those people go through all these steps to do those mods. I doubt I'll ever get to micro soldering. I don't even think about that. Oh, I'm not even good at soldering. I can do it just fine, but I'm a little bit out of practice. But oh yeah, I got to fix the super monitor in the shed. Shoot, I got to do that. That monitor's great. So I have this old Samsung monitor. It's not that old, but I have an old Samsung monitor. And this silly little monitor, it's a little LCD, but it's bulky. But a smallish LCD, I forget, is it 15-inch? I don't know. Might be 12-inch. I forget. It's not super huge or anything. But it is, I think it's 720 because of its size. But it has every freaking connector that you could possibly think of on the back. I mean, every connector. It's got VGA, HDMI, S-video, composite video, RF, cable. It's got all of them. And it crapped out. And I was oh, damn. But of course, I know about bad capacitors. And I know enough electronics to be dangerous and useless. And I opened it up and I was oh, here are the capacitors that are bad. And I ordered the capacitors. I have them. I've had them for a year probably at this point. And I just have to well, then we get massive disruption. The back room is a complete catastrophe. It's perfectly usable with a little bit of notice. But I can't fold up the bed right now and set up the crafts table and sit and solder like I was doing. That's why I have a Murphy bed in that back room. So I'm like, oh, damn it. Otherwise, it would be fixed. It would already be fixed. It would just be completely fixed because I just have to solder like 8 caps, and it should be fine. And then I would use it again immediately because I already have a use for it and everything. Like it's got a home. It needs to go back in it, so I might put it on the wall. I might wall mount it or whatever, but and keep it in that room. But yeah, it just all these little things. And does it have HDMI 6.1? I forget what version of HDMI it has on it. But it is older, right? So it's not doesn't have the latest. That would be impressive. I don't remember, Father, what it actually has. It just has every connection. So like I can set up any of the retro computers on it, like any of them. It doesn't matter. It's got S video. It's got composite. It's got component. It's just got it's so many connectors on the back of it is this big square of connectors. It's so regular VGA, HDMI. It's so nuts. I'm just like, this is insane. This is the most insane. And I bought it, kind of quite by accident. So I don't know. They are still on HDMI 2.1. I don't know anything about HDMI standards. Why do I pay attention to that? I don't care about video. I care about gamer cards because they do the math, the matrix math, and the AI. But I actually don't care about gaming because I'm not a gamer. And except for Quake World, which I was quite good at, thank you very much. Nah. And actually the ultimate game to get working is not because everybody uses Minecraft for testing, like the garbage. Good Lord. I'm so tempted to put that through a converter and convert it to C code and then recompile it because it'll be 100 times faster overnight, even with a bad code converter. Descent is a much better game to get working for testing. And if you don't know what Descent is amazing because it's like Doom in it's a first of its kind of game. But basically you're in 3D space as a floating object or a flying object. And so it's a completely different kind of game. And I actually bought was it called a Spaceball? I think it's called a Spaceball controller. I have it still. It's in the shed. To play with it because it was one of the first 3-dimensional controllers. And the only reason why I knew about them is because at the time I worked for PTC, Parametric Technology Corporation. And because they did CAD CAM, Spaceball was making controllers for CAD CAM. Which obviously is where all the money was, not in gaming controllers, that's for sure. Certainly not back then. And so they had gaming controllers. And I was like, I want one of your gaming controllers. And so I don't know if I got one for cheap or discount or free. I don't remember, but I got one and I still have it. And it's virtually useless because almost nothing works with it, but that's a different problem. It's a ball that moves back and forth and rotates. It's kind of a cool concept, the way they made the controller work. So it's a neat.
You could probably hook it up to that TV and then just use it to navigate whatever menus you've got.
I have so many like old joysticks and stuff, and then I've got the Amigas. I have 3 Amigas at least, and like I don't know what happened. I bought a blue Amiga 500 case, and they never sent it, but they sent me the white one because they had a special if you signed up with the project early. And this was all pre-fake news virus scam. And I had signed up right away. I was like, I really want a blue Amiga. And so they never sent me my blue case, but I got my white one mysteriously out of the blue one day. And I was like, yay. And I just, of course, the shed's still a mess. I don't have my workspace right now. And yeah, it's kind of a mess. Rename the stream to Retro Tech with Mark. No, I haven't even touched my Retro Tech. I could, but I'm not gonna because I just lose Castle.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're already talking about stuff that's older than me. I mean, there's
exactly. Yeah, well, and one day I will, maybe we'll get our act together here and we'll win the lottery or something and dig our way out of hell and have an area to show off some of the tech because the shed's full. Who knows what's in the shed? I've got an HP. Is it a 900 series? I've got a Sun 360 pizza box, which is a 68,000 base Sun machine, which is much better than the other Sun machines. I've got some Spark Station somewhere. I've got an old Mac. I've got some SGI hardware. Ixnot, if you get the white case out of the blue, maybe you get the blue one out of the white. Ha ha ha. Cute. I'm pissed that they didn't send me the blue. I ordered the blue one. The white one was just like, we'll give you a free white case. I'm like, what? I don't care. That's fine. And then I thought I might. It's possible I have 2 Amiga 500s somewhere, in which case I'll be pissed because then I need another. I don't need another case. Probably would be fine, but also, and mine's all heavily modified. It's got fatter Agnes and a PAL mod and all kinds of freaking upgrades, and like there's soldered wires all over it and stuff. Yeah, it's an intense. Back in the day, back when I was a boy, and then I got a hard drive for it that's broken, but I've got the hard drive controller with SCSI and all that nonsense. Back then, but computers are a great way to learn steps, because if you don't go in order on a computer, it don't work. It's not. There's no ambiguity, and you can't make an excuse. The best managed company I ever worked for to this day was UPS. And the reason why is because you can't lie about boxes, and you can't lie to boxes. Like either they got to where they were going or they didn't, and they have a label. So like, I don't know what's going on, right? And you could tell where in the sequence they went wrong, right? Based on where they ended up. And that's, your computer will do exactly what you tell it to most of the time, kind of. Unless you run Windows in the past 10 years.
Tell that to all of the client people that we have reaching out by phone.
Dangerous. Yes, also very dangerous. Well, I used to explain to my clients all the time especially when I was doing release engineering and automation for them. I'm like, automation's great. I'm an automation expert. Like, this is one of the things I do, right? At the time, that was my big job, was automation, long before it became popular or anything. And I said, the problem is if you automate a bad process, you get lots of it very fast. You don't. If you automate a bug, you'll get lots of bug. And they would normally, make that mistake. And then, because I was always like, you don't want to fully automate anything. You want to have checks and balances. You want to have a stopping point where people check things. And they would be like, no, we want to automate the whole pipeline. And I'm like, okay, bro, you're paying the money. I get paid whether you screw it up or not. So I'll do what you tell me after I told you not to. And inevitably they would want to back it off and fix it. And I was like, well, okay, I can change it. Of course, I kind of designed it with the changes in mind. I always pipeline my automation on purpose. And then people are like, we don't understand this. I'm like, if you don't understand a pipeline, you probably need to never be doing anything with computers ever. You don't know what to tell you. Like, sequence is really important. Pipelines are really important. Not just in computers, by the way, but also in computers. And that's like the problem with Elon. And these guys are like, well, we need access to these smart people on H1B. I've never met a smart Indian software architect. I'm sure they exist. I've run into a lot of them, and most of them were absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. A few of them are not. The ones educated here tend to be really good. And if they got educated here, they probably don't need an H-1B visa. There might be a hint. I don't know what to tell you. It's been that way forever. I was working, one of the last contracts I did, actually, it was up in Chicago, was the company, but I only went up there for half a day. But they interviewed somebody down here in Colombia who was remote. And they found out later that the person that got sent, that they hired, was not the person they interviewed on the video call. And then they were like, well, yeah, this is unbelievable. And I'm staring at them like, you guys are telling me you've been in this industry for like over 10 years and you've never seen this. I don't believe you. They were a boutique Fortune 500 consulting firm. I'm like, bro, this is standard practice for the Indians in particular. They brag about it. I've seen this so many times. It's not, I couldn't count it if I wanted to. This is standard practice. And they were like, oh my God, we can't believe. And I'm just like, where have you been? And I'm sure they were told, I'm sure it's happened and they missed it. And they were told over and over again. But they, oh no, that would never happen. This is the Fortune 500. And I'm like, yeah, the Fortune 500 gets scammed easily. I hate to say it. Really easily. Because they're big behemoth systems. And once you know the loophole, you keep exploiting it forever because it takes them forever to figure it out and cover the hole.
Yeah.
It's the trade-off. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just the way the world is. And a lot of the problems people have with the world is skipping steps. They're like, well, I thought the legal system worked this way, but I never looked into it. Right? I just have this perfected version of it in my head. And then they look at something and they go, how could the legal system produce this result? And they go, the world is falling. And I'm like, the legal system's been like that for 15 years. I think I can show you the goods. Like, this is not new. And it's probably been like that longer, right? But it got bad 15 years ago, we'll say, right? And sorry, like, yeah, you weren't paying attention. I agree. You can't pay attention to all this stuff. So you compress it down, but you're skipping steps. Like, you've made a bunch of assumptions about the world, that the world is really much more imperfect than you suspect. All the pieces of it too. All the individual parts.
Something I was thinking about was this aspect of I'm thinking a little bit more about that comment earlier about the no signal thing, but also the aspect of not taking a step at all, but intending to. So, like, there's the one thing of, okay, I'm not going to do this because I'm a conscientious objector or whatever kind of thing, and it's just like, okay, yeah, we talked about that a bit. Maybe that's appropriate sometimes, and like that requires discernment. But I'm thinking of, there's something I heard just this week was interesting, because I had never heard these two things like kind of juxtaposed together. But there was something where a person was warned against sluggardly prudence. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. That this idea of like, we have to get it just right. And it's just like, oh, like I had heard guys like, General Patton go and they say, it's better to just execute a decent plan violently right now than the perfect plan next week and everything. It's like, yeah, fair enough. But I hadn't really heard the reverse sort of thing of like, be cautious of sluggardly prudence, because you need to be prudent enough to realize when being prudential is not enough, and it's like, there is that sort of thing of like, well, the same thing as trying to figure out your ability to touch something through measurement. It's just like, yeah, you've reached the edge of the frame, and maybe if you're logical, reasonable, and rational, you might actually be able to realize that you are at the edge of your frame.
Right.
And so it's like you can use the frame to break the frame a little bit if you're actually willing to look at it and realize like, oh, we need to move up a layer or something like that.
Well, or realize you're out of your depth, and you shouldn't. Like, a lot of people, like, this actually happened on Clubhouse, right? There was this one woman on Clubhouse, and she was like, I didn't realize until I was on Clubhouse that I could just say no and not wear a mask. Like, a lot of people didn't realize. She was in New York City. She's like, I didn't realize I could just move out of New York City, get a job for much less money, but actually have much more money at the end of the day by living somewhere else and in a nicer climate.
Yeah.
Like, people just had no idea these were options. Didn't know I could stop, drop, and roll, right? Yawn God. Wouldn't the answer be you slept on it and you decided no? I mean, sometimes you don't have time to sleep on it. You should, like, I've been doing this my whole life. You should decide in advance what things you can sleep on and what things you can't. And you also need to know, and this is why reading Taleb is really helpful. Taleb talks about this. He says, Oh yeah, once my friend and I had the opportunity to do a deal with George Soros. Now, whatever you think of George Soros, because he's certainly fundamentally evil, but whatever you think of George Soros, doing a deal with a man that wealthy, probably not a bad thing, right? Like, sounds like a good opportunity to me, right? And then George Soros, like, they had lunch with him, and he's like, "Oh, that sounds like a good idea, and yeah, let's move forward with that. Call me tomorrow." And they called him the next day, and he said, "Yeah, I changed my mind now." It's like, there you go. And so he never did a deal with George Soros, and he was okay. He was just like, and he put it in his book as like a lesson. Yeah, you should be able to change your mind. That's really important. You want people that change their minds, at least on certain things, because those people are like reflective, right? And they respond to new information, and new information sometimes is just reflection, right? It just flat out reflecting on what you've already done or said, or what the situation right now is, reflecting on your frame, understanding your limitations, right? And sometimes sleeping on it is the right answer, but knowing when that's not an option is good too, because sometimes it's not an option. You gotta make a decision in the moment.
And plus, kind of being aware that sometimes people will try to like enchant you or force team you into a position like that. I think it was like the old trope of like the Japanese businessmen where they would go and they'd invite some guy over and, oh yeah, you'll stay here for a week, and we'll go and we'll show you the sights and everything. We'll talk business, we'll do all that stuff. And then it's like in the limo on the way to the airport is the first time that they mention the business stuff. And it's just like, oh, well, we had such a wonderful time, dinners and all these other wonderful things that we showed you and everything like that, and the nicest hotel. But down to business, we forgot. Sorry, it's been 7 days, but we know you're like 20 minutes away from the airport. Hope you enjoyed it. Everything, by the way, it was free. Anyway, what do you think? It's just like that guy, hopefully, if he was smart, already made his decisions well in advance and then enjoyed the stuff on their dime. But, what are the odds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Young God, weaponizing incompetence is brilliant. Unfortunately, most incompetence is completely accidental. This is like you can make a correlation between incompetent people being in important positions and bad outcomes. And if you think the world is rational and only ever rational, then you need a term like weaponized incompetence. Now, look, I have worked places and seen people and talked to managers who definitely didn't necessarily, although in one case they did say this outright, didn't necessarily admit, oh, I put that incompetent person there on purpose for this reason, because that did happen at least once. But I've also noticed that does happen. It's actually really rare. Most people don't know who's incompetent and who isn't. Just flat out, most managers have no idea who's good and who isn't. They have none. Zero way to tell. They just actually don't know. I'm sorry, right? And if the manager were good enough at the job to know one way or the other, then they wouldn't be the manager. They'd be doing the job. And I'm sorry, that's just like the reason why people fail upward is because if they're motivated and they're on time and they're just not good at that job, you should switch jobs until you find a place where they fit in your organization. Like, you should. That is actually the correct answer. I know it looks bad from the outside, and sometimes people who should get fired don't get fired because of that. But also, it is on average the correct answer for a business in all cases. Very sorry. Very, very sorry. We live in an imperfect world with imperfect people. It's not a rational world full of rational decisions made by people who are well educated and understand what's around them. And that happens, but it's so rare, it's really not worth talking about. It might be worth going, ooh, Elon's awesome, because also, Young God, the joke is that they didn't forget to say what the job was 20 minutes before reaching the airport. Right? Yeah, well. Yeah, look, I mean, people have lots of strategies of enchantment. And if you think you're going to not be enchanted, you're just wrong. If you think there's a quote defense against the dark arts, I don't know what to tell you. You're kind of doomed though. Sorry. You've already been enchanted by the idea that there's a way to get around enchantment. And your best bet is to enchant your life deliberately with good things. And then there won't be space for bad enchantment. Is that a perfect strategy? No. You know what else isn't a perfect strategy? All the other strategies. Okay, don't. It's all perfection, people. It's like you need to drop the perfection and go after the best available answer. Right? You don't need perfection. You don't need the perfect to be the enemy of the good. It's the perfect is the enemy of the better. Because you only need to be better. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be good. You just need to be better. Be better. That's a lovely shirt, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know where I found that either.
I found it. I think you found it in your mail.
I did. Where can other people find that?
I think it's on the Mark of Wisdom store. It should be in the description of this very video. markofwisdom.org/shop. Should be there. You can order your own and then be better like everybody else. And yeah, I mean, I think the deep confusion. I mean, people skip steps, right? Because looking for perfection is skipping steps. Like, first try to make it better and then worry about whether or not you can make anything perfect. How's that? Try to make one thing. This is the genius in Peterson's stuff. Clean your room. And then maybe clean something outside your room after you've figured out how to freaking clean your room and keep it clean. And then maybe you can, right? And then bigger and bigger and bigger. Start at the bottom, at the simplest thing you have the most control over. And then expand your sphere of influence slowly. And then know your limits. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, well. Don't start with, I'm going to fix the climate by yelling at people and holding signs and getting in front of traffic. No, you're not. That's not going to happen ever. That's never going to work.
It reminds me of the whole...
Yon God, bro, clean the world has such a ring to it. I agree. Go ahead, Castle.
Well, I'm thinking of the enchantment thing. I mean, it just reminds me of the whole thing with like the siren song, that you've got all the different strategies. And it's most of them are exemplified by Odysseus and just like his actual failure to, because he wants the enchantment. Like he's the guy that wants the whole show of, we're gonna go on the business trip and they're gonna show me all this nice. Like he knows he's getting fleeced, but he still wants to enjoy all the nice things. Right. And then you've got the other guys who are just working and they have their ears plugged and they just see their boss ranting and raving and everything like that. Or you just got the guy that just dives overboard and just dies instantly. Or then you've got the Jason and the Argonauts thing where they just play better music. And then no one can hear the weak singing talent of the sirens. Because they get a rock concert on a boat. And it's like that, I mean, and that does work at those tiny little scales. Like even enchanting the tiny little stuff that you're doing. Like I think of the tiny, like you can't get me to do gardening. You actually just can't. I won't garden, but I can, I'll fold every towel in the world, like I'll just folding clothes, washing dishes, that type of stuff comes really easily to me. And it's actually like a meaningful thing because I recognize that like, okay, not only is it's a low impact activity as well. So even like I can logic, reason, and rationality thing. It's not actually the enchantment that I have, but I can rationalize after the fact, like, okay, well, this is a low impact thing that isn't wrecking my momentum. And I can go from some high impact tasks and then kind of keep my momentum and then catch my breath and do all these things. But there is something that's very, very relaxing about doing that. And, but yeah, just being able to recognize like, yeah, I'd rather outsource the other stuff. Like, there's people, I mean, the ones that have the money for it, that are willing to actually just pay someone to flat out wash their dishes and laundry, and it's like that's not me. But I'm also the type of person that would pay someone to do the gardening. So, which is why,
I know somebody who convinced herself that her washer was broken. And then when I said, no, your washer's not broken, it's totally fine. I just used it. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. She was like, well, I'm still not going to use it. I'm going to continue to take my clothes down the street and pay $6 or whatever the hell it was to have them washed and folded every week. And I'm just like, she doesn't do dishes. She actually has paper plates. I'm just like, I can't understand the way you live. But Caslam, I mean, I'm glad to hear that you like fold clothes and like
I do. I was just doing it earlier.
Dishes. And you're gonna make a wonderful wife someday.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well, you had to know that was coming.
Oh yeah, that's fine. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm not gonna stoop to that level, right? I got some so spring loaded that you stepped on, but that's fine.
Oh yeah, well, it's gonna happen. I just have to go easy on you while you're editing my book, and then after that,
yeah, that's fine.
Gloves are off. So, you're gonna get Adam's treatment. Every opportunity to make fun of Ireland. Poor Adam.
Gosh.
Yeah. We have
make me competitive.
Yeah. No, we just had a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Oh yeah. But man, I don't know. Are we missing any steps?
We're always missing steps. I mean, that is part of the problem. Like, you need the humility to know that you're probably missing steps a lot. And the thing is, if you're not open to that, you'll just miss more steps. Like, you have to, like, this is the Eric Weinstein problem, right? Like, I've got it all figured out. It's like, bro, you're just missing a bunch of stuff. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, this is the thing too. Like, everyone makes it in the age of gnosis, right? Where knowledge is propositions and like they're tradable, like freaking bubblegum cards or something. Like, everyone's so like, I have the entire set. And it's like, this isn't Pokemon. Like, no one has an entire set to give you. And you can't derive an entire set by yourself. It's okay. That just makes you like everybody else. If you guys want equality, you all suck equally. How's that? Like, I know that's the way that we're equal. And of course, the data shows like the higher IQ you have, the more well-educated you are, the more prone you are to certain biases. And actually, people who farm and have a low IQ are not prone to those biases. Sorry. Like, there's a trade-off. You're just constantly in the trade-off realm. And you have to accept that. And you should recognize, like, oh, somebody told me something that I didn't know about a thing that I experienced. Maybe I should be more careful. The lesson isn't, well, I'll do it again and see what happens. No, don't do that. That's dangerous. You already screwed it up once. What makes you think you won't screw it up again? You need a little humility. You need to accept help, right? Like, you should accept help. You should accept new knowledge. You should accept that maybe what's going on is I don't know what's going on, right? Maybe I was enchanted by somebody else, right? That's you bastard. I'm gonna shoot Ixnan. Mark being mean and aggressive. Maybe read the room and examine your primordial presupposition. I hate you.
You're gonna take primordial responsibility for your actions.
He's hitting all my buttons at once. I forget who I was talking to. He said, Mark, you shouldn't have told anybody. I think it was Father Eric, actually, but it might not have been. But you shouldn't have told anybody that you didn't like primordial presuppositions. I'm like,
yeah.
Bro, I did it on a commentary video. Like, what do you want me to do? It's on the internet. I had to do it. It was part of the commentary. Like, now everybody knows I despise that term. Sally like pokes me with it like every other day. I'm just like, oh, please. Just like, it's going to make me nihilistic. There is no God. These are my friends. There's no hope for me at all.
I'm surprised that she hasn't played the primordial soup can thing that I said to her.
I think she mentioned it once.
Yeah.
I
Oh my
wanted her
goodness.
to make primordial soup can instead of the Campbell's soup can. I wanted her to rip off Andy Warhol, but she hasn't done it.
Oh my goodness. It wouldn't be that hard.
Never let them see you sweat. Well, Father, that would be dishonest. I definitely sweat. I have my limitations. Primordial is my limitation. Man, that just frosts me. I'm like, bro, you don't even understand the word you're using or where it came from. Like, you just shouldn't use it. I'm sorry. Like, the Dr. Vervaeke. The thing is, people are like, oh, I don't know, man. You're a little harsh. And I'm like, hey, jerk off. I lost a teacher. Like, he was a great teacher. He built all of this, is directly attributable to his work. And I lost him. Like, he's gone. Like, he's completely gone. Just too bad. A year's worth of work, meetings every week, right down the tubes. So sad. So sad. It's a disaster, but what are you going to do? I mean, we still have our stuff and we're going to make progress with it. And we've got the Wisdom Community book coming out soon, maybe second week of January. Castle, what do you think? I think we're making
That's
good
what
progress.
I like. Yeah, I mean, if this other guy stops putting all the stuff I need to edit in there, then we could probably get it done faster.
Well, I don't know. I think I made good progress on the Why Wisdom Community section. So
no, you did. I started editing the upper part of that. I think I'm down to. I'm not going to spoil any of the stuff, but I think I'm about halfway down. And then I think the bottom part is also already edited anyway. So I just need to get the middle bit. And then I think we're pretty much done with that chapter after your review and any additions you want. And then we'll probably move to cooperation.
Yeah, I think I got 4 more paragraphs in there. And then we can move down the list. But yeah. Well, we got to do wisdom. That's the other big catastrophe.
That one I'm going to count on you to organize before I get it. Because there's lists and stuff.
It'll come now that we have the first one done. The second one will just kind of pop out like the first one did, which is your fault, by the way. But we went over that earlier.
But yeah,
that's why you needed an editor. Like I wasn't going to organize it that way, and then you wrote what you wrote, and I was like, why? You got this all wrong. What is wrong with this guy? He sucks. And then bang, like the whole thing. And what are we, 6 paragraphs later or something from your one, your one, like slight miss? It was such a minor error too, but I was like, no, this is completely wrong. Why is he skipping steps? He's skipping steps. I was so pissed off. Like, I thought he knew this stuff. Oh my God, how did he make this mistake?
Yeah, unless it was a trap for you to just write the rest of the chapter for me.
You went and wrote that, and I was like, where did this come from? This is all wrong.
You gave me 5 bullet points to write all of those paragraphs based on. And what do I get? An entire extra page and a half of stuff to edit.
Yes. Well, that'll teach you.
Yeah.
You shouldn't listen to me. That's your own fault. I can't help you with that. You need discernment. That's what
lesson learned. Never listen to you again.
It's a good idea. I wouldn't listen to me. Terrible advice. Yeah.
Step 9, never listen to Mark.
I'll put that in the workbook. It'll be in the workbook, though, not the regular book. Be in the workbook.
Be the last chapter. People realize too late.
Yes. It's too late now. I've colonized you, but you shouldn't listen to me. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just punk the whole audience on the book. That would be great. Yeah, that should be coming soon. We should artwork's flowing and the whole 9 yards.
It looks great. Yeah.
Yeah, you liked it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sally sent it to me, and I'm like, you don't know what is wrong with this person. We keep telling her, like, send it to Castle. I'm trying to write words. Don't distract me with art. Because if I start to get, from a marketing perspective, because I'll switch frames. But then I got to switch back. It's very expensive. And I'm not necessarily the best at that anyway. So I will do it, but maybe I shouldn't. So don't tempt me.
Well, that's the thing, is that not every step needs to be taken by the same person.
That's a good point that I didn't really make was, well, because part of the secret is this right. I'm still using the from the individual perspective out framing for these live streams in particular, but also the videos, right? But yeah, I mean, if you can't do a step, don't do it. Like, get it done by somebody else, right? Or get it from somewhere else. And then everybody objects. Well, they might make a mistake. No, they're going to make a mistake, just like you do. The thing is, you want to reduce the number of errors, not get them to zero. And once you understand that, like I said, like, just make it better. Don't make it perfect. And then, take the best available answer first. Don't try to take the perfect answer, especially not as you conceive of it, because you're a Muppet. What the hell do you know?
Well, and that's the thing with those people that should probably get fired, but then don't, is that a lot of times, it's still a lot better to actually have someone there that can do the job like 3/4 of the way or half the way. And I see this sometimes where you get some of these guys where it's like, okay, what can we actually give this guy? Because he's, maybe he's not bad at the job, but his attitude is just so horrifically bad that it's just like, oh, he raised his voice at a doctor or something like that, or like a practice admin or something like that over something small. And it's just like, okay. But also firing him and then going and searching for someone and then hopefully getting someone that's hypothetically better and then training them and doing all of that other stuff is a whole lot more expensive than just running with this and giving him stuff that has less people contact, at least for now, and then maybe other stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So Father Eric actually posted this video on the Discord about this story. I think it's Veritasium or something. I actually don't like that guy at all. He says a lot of stupid things, but only I would know that, because this really helps when you've been to MIT and talked to a bunch of high-end physicists about things. But it was the story of the guy who invented the PCR DNA test, where you multiply the DNA and then you can actually look at it. And like, I'm just listening to the story and I'm like, well, this is a catastrophe. I don't know anybody who would actually want to be this guy if they actually listen to this story. But I know there are people who are going to be like, oh yeah, that sounds awesome, right? And I think Father Eric's right. The takeaway is take drugs, because it'll give you insight into this. And it's like, and they always miss the bigger story, right? Because if you actually, again, don't skip steps and do the research, the thing about drug use is there's some patterns in drug use that are fantastically interesting. And if you actually took them seriously, you'd probably, once you figured them out, like, seek a church immediately. And if you didn't, there's a problem with you. Much like reading the end of The Republic, book 10, and not immediately just going to church. But I have a whole video on that, on navigating patterns, just saying. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with people. I don't know why they can't, but I think it is that sequence thing. They just can't understand the next step in their own path, in their own journey. And they keep stepping sideways or backwards or whatever because they've pre-filtered for not the answer that the path is taking them on. Right? And this is my great insight. If you haven't seen the commentary on the Peugeot Vervaeke Jordan Hall video, I think it's part 3 or something, where I have this great insight. Jordan Hall gives me this great insight, which was nice. And basically I realized, oh, the whole problem with Vervaeke is he's already rejected the Trinity. And then he fell
Yeah,
into
I remember that.
dualism.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you fall into dualism reduces to nihilism, basically, right? To monism and then to nihilism. And that's why when you talk about Neoplatonism, he talks about the one, and never talks about the many. Well, if you're talking about the one all the time, what are you doing? You're actually ruining discernment of the many. You don't have it, and you're not talking about the discernment of the many. And that means you can't separate yourself from the world, which means you don't know where you end and other things begin. And what are you going to do? Well, you're going to say things like, you should know this. How would I know that? Why do you think I would know something that you know? That's a little weird, to be honest. Why are you presuming what I know? I think that's kind of strange. Why can't you just ask me what I know and don't know? It's a little weird. Oh, look, it's Bruce. Good to see you, sir.
Hey guys.
How you doing?
How you doing?
Good, man. Just having a little relaxation on a Friday night. And I saw you streaming again. I figured you would be, so here I am.
Excellent. Did you listen to any of my stream? You're just going to come in here and crash it and ruin it all for everybody, Bruce.
I'm absolutely going to crash it and ruin it all.
Excellent. Good to have you. Good to have you. No, we're talking about steps and skipping steps, and I was just kind of pointing out.
I think I got the pattern there.
Can't make logical leaps anymore because they can't understand sequence. Like what comes next, they just don't get it.
Well, there's a lack of like inquisitive nature to even develop that skill. Like there's probably a sense in which people have an innate sense of pattern recognition or logic from their birth that others don't. But also, like, it's a skill that doesn't seem to be fostered very much anymore because you don't have to do logical step taking. Things are given to you through sort of like that age of gnosis sort of stuff, right? We just get the knowledge. We don't have to get to the knowledge. We just get the knowledge. And so it's the consumption of knowledge is not a step taking process. It's fed to you like a baby. And so why would you need to take steps? Because you can just get at the answer without even evaluating the steps in the first place. So I think that's part of the problem there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. John wants to know if that is a fake background or does Bruce live in an actually? It's a fake background, Don.
Fake, yeah.
I know all of Bruce's backgrounds, so
not that one.
I know it's fake.
I have a lot of books, but they're not like this.
Looks like you have in that picture, you've got lobes or something. One of the wonderful things that I got for Christmas, what were some lobes.
Oh, there you go. Good. Yeah, there's definitely some of those in there. I think this is a snapshot from the Harvard Library, actually.
Boy, that's there's a lot to the Harvard Library.
Yeah,
I don't
snapshot. Who knows?
Well, I've been in the Harvard Library. It's just that doesn't look super familiar to me, but this is not a surprise.
It is a huge place, but yeah, I mean, skipping important parts. The thing that's interesting is one of the things you don't really know is what's important until you skipped it. How do you know what's important unless somebody either A, guides you along the path and tells you what's important, or B, you know that you've missed an important step after you've missed it?
Yeah, well, and if you haven't been shown steps, and one of the things I was talking about is like, even like Critical Drinker goes through steps when he, talks about his movies. Like this was good, but this wasn't, right? But then there's a lot of retro guys, that's all about re-enchanting people with steps. Here are the steps I used for troubleshooting. Here are the steps I used for upgrading. Here are the steps, right? Here are the steps. Here are the steps. Here are the steps. So we know we're missing steps. Like we know they're not there, which I find interesting. And I don't think people know that, right? I don't think they're really aware of the fact that the steps are actually, you need them. You're actually seeking them. But in some cases, you're not. You're getting the wrong ones. Yeah. And again, like knowing, maybe you can't reason things through. And have you been on Twitter at all, Bruce? I know you've been kind of like.
Yeah, I mean, I have enough to know. I have enough to know a few things.
Yeah, but have you been on today? Did you see my big dust up today?
Oh, not today. No.
Oh, good Lord. No, I was talking about this. Like this guy got into it with Gerard with me, which of course is a mistake because I'm fairly well researched. And he was saying, no, the only thing that causes violence is mimetic desire. And I was like, well, like literally, like not too long ago, maybe 5 years ago, the only thing that caused violence was a fight over resources. And I was saying, like, no, there are resources that you fight over, not for mimicry. And he said, you give me an example. And I was like, food and water, which are required for life. And he said, I don't understand what you're talking about. And I was just like, I can't help you. Like, you're too dumb. He kept saying he didn't understand my point. And I'm like, my point was that your statement was wrong. And here's the example that you asked for. Like, I don't know why this is unclear. Like, can you disprove my example, please? Oh, you can't. And he told me up front too. He asked me, like, I want a list of things for which, Gerard is making a mistake. And I was like, well, yeah, that's easy. I will
I
give
mean,
you a
yeah,
list.
full
But
cards on
then
the table for me. That makes sense.
before I saw it, he had responded to his own message and said, there's no possible list you could give because everything falls under Gerard's mimicry. And I was like, what? You've already presupposed that I can't answer your question, dude. Like, we're not going to make any progress.
I see the thread here. Yeah. So this was Robert Barron.
What was on
Bishop
Barron's thing? Yeah. Well, there's
Yeah.
a bunch of stuff on there. That was
Yeah.
a mess.
I
want
see
to
it.
talk to Bishop Barron about Gerard. I want to warn him. Like, no, did you listen? Are you actually listening to what he's saying? Because I don't think you agree with any of that. Some of it, like, and this is what I was saying. Gerard's actually talking about the two least talked about things that are the most important things right now, which are mimicry and sacrifice, although he calls it scapegoat. And like, that's why he's so attractive. And I guess a documentary just came out about Gerard, so I got to watch that. It's an hour and a half.
Okay.
Like, when am I going to find an hour and a half? I got a book to write. Like, leave me alone. And then I got a book club to prepare for, and I still got to finish the other two freaking book clubs, one of which is never going to end. We'll get done with Moby Dick pretty soon, but and I got to watch this stupid thing. Wait a minute. Well, Father Eric, hook a boy up. Come on. I want to talk to Bishop Barron. Like, get me on there. I'll talk to him about Gerard. I'll talk about anything. I don't care. I'll talk about the recession of the church. There's so many things I could talk to him about. We could give him that idea that you couldn't implement there because those demons were ahead of us. That would be powerful. Let's get the Catholics exemplifying goodness again. That'd be fantastic. I'll talk to him about anything. I just need to get in front of him and show him what's going on because he's too nice. He's too nice. No. And it's not that the people he's talking to are not nice. It's that they're just lost in a way that he doesn't see. So, yeah. Father, it's hilarious that the Moby Dick book club is going to finish before the language of creation. Well, kind of. You have to consider. I think the Moby Dick book club would take 42 times as long if we had to do it with Protestants, because they just don't get the symbolism correctly in the book. And so that's the problem with language creation. It's taking a long time because symbolism is hard for them because they don't have the tools. So, yeah. And language creation is, well, to be fair, language creation is actually not a book. Like, I'm sorry, it's not a book. It's mostly pictures. And all of the content is in the pictures. And so actually, in terms of communication of information, it is 10 times more dense than Moby Dick, I would say. What do you think, Castle?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, well, and that's the thing with language of creation is a lot of times, like, I've gone from this point of I'll look at the diagram, but then because I think so visually, I'm interpreting what I'm seeing in my head. So I'm going through this thing where I see the diagram and it's like, yes, it's okay, like, and I'll see, like a bunch of different examples of that pattern going on. but
Yeah.
then I'm reading through the text and just generating images of this stuff. So like sometimes you might even see me in the Language of Creation book club, like actually like put my hands over my eyes because I'm like looking at the thing,
Yeah.
like I'm looking at the diagrams in my head of the thing, and it's just like, gosh, sometimes when I go off for a while, it's just like, how do I then communicate this ridiculous set of images that I have? And then, but yeah, I mean, we're only doing like a chapter every time now, which is like 4 pages for 2 to 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
We probably could go a little faster, but it's like, I don't know. Is it better? Like, are we skipping steps if we're going faster, or are we?
Right.
I don't know.
No, I mean, you can't. Yeah, you can't go faster because everyone's they're struggling, especially at the end of the book, because the symbolism just gets deeper and richer, right? And so there's way more connections there than there were in the beginning, we'll say. Because the beginning was just setting, laying groundwork, and in the middle is sort of like how to build things, right? And then the end is just, well, here's the symbol, and now you get to tie it into like everything.
Right. Like that was why I was
a lot of things.
In the beginning, like in the first 30 or because I wasn't there in the first couple of weeks, but I showed up on like week 4, something like that. That I was doing like, I was doing diagrams, I had the whiteboard, I was doing stuff like that to try to flesh out a lot of, because the problem that we were running into was it was too abstract. And especially unfortunately for some of the participants that we had that haven't been able to come along, like they seem to find some of that useful, because we were just, it's better to flesh these things out a little bit more. And then I was like, okay, there's a little more I could work with. I did like a couple of 3D models. We never used one of them. Unfortunately, I was going to use the one, but then RJ wasn't there and I made it for him. So I was like, oh, well, but I'll have to just like send it to him one of these days. But but then I realized I was like, oh, there's actually no more need for these visual representations, because those are not high enough resolution to match the stuff that we're talking about anymore. Like I would have to actually present you with like a 3-dimensional movie or something like that, like something that you could actually experience in person. Like we would have to put on a play or something like that for you to do.
It's sort of, well, I don't want to derail the whole thing on the topic of symbolism per se, but that what you're describing, Castle, is I'm trying to represent maybe some of my Protestant brothers a little bit. What you're describing is the problem for us. And I don't mean that like we can't do that. I mean that's why we don't subscribe to it to some degree, because it's far too abstract to put into what we maybe would consider to be material term or objective term, or some version that would be systematized. So when you're talking about now I would say, to be fair, in the classical Reformed Protestant, which I would say is a different category, really, there's types and metaphors, and so we speak in terms of types or in terms of metaphor, which is almost exchanged for symbol. If you could exchange the terms, that's been largely removed in what I would consider to be what mainline evangelical Protestantism, for fear of I don't know, whatever you want to call it, popish idolatry or some other sorts of things, pagan idolatry. But that's part of the reason why it's difficult, is because there's almost an inherent subjectivism that's difficult to get across, and so Protestants or otherwise are looking for um, objective, systematized positions, not positions that require subjective interpretation of something so symbolic, right? In that, I mean, it is symbolism, but basically, like harmonizing symbols across other people groups is difficult to do. But I would say you can do it with metaphorical types in the scriptures. But anyway, that's just to sort of add clarity to that. That's my that would be my like defense of that camp to some degree.
And I would definitely agree with you, and I do think that that's something that, I mean, it's been, even though it hasn't been really like a conscious effort that I'm making specifically to like that logical end, I'm like the kind of vacuum, I guess, that I've been trying to fill in those book clubs, especially when we get kind of like the comment sections and things like that, is to see that a lot of times people just aren't getting the visual or practical aspect of it. And then so I just try to just think up those types of examples as much as I possibly can, and a lot of
Yeah.
times they're kind of silly or even ridiculous, but it's just like something that you can actually imagine that you've experienced,
Yeah, well,
and
that's the thing. It's
remember.
imagine. Yeah, and that's kind of to sort of stay on the theme. To me, when you get into symbolism as an ism, uh, I think you are skipping the important parts. That's kind of where I fall on
Well,
some
you
of
get
that because you're using some other system. You're coming backwards as far as I'm concerned. Like you're looking at the symbol and then taking your subjective system and putting it on the symbol, as opposed to saying what does the
yeah.
symbol intend to mean from its
Well,
origin.
that's the danger. But also, I think when you run up against the wall of what fundamentalism can offer you, those are the people that are attracted to the book, because then there's something to offer there. So if you understand symbol as something that links two things together and allows for some flexibility as far as where you enter the symbol and where you exit the symbol, because not everybody can enter from the same place because we're not in the same place. We can't exit the same place because we're not the same abilities. Then it's a whole different interaction. And actually, Bruce, I think it was the last one where I talked about, somebody asked about jazz. And so I just went into jazz. I'm like, okay, let me show you how this works. And they were like, oh my God, like I feel like I'm a first grader and you're like college
Mhm.
level on this or something. It was a really flattering comment that I really appreciated. Um, but yeah, I'd actually be interested in your take on that, because that was a practical application of what
Mhm.
we were talking about in the book at the time. And if you
Okay.
want, I'll try to get a timestamp for it for you, because I'd love to
Yeah.
hear
I
your
mean,
take on it. Because I know you're a music guy, so you would
yeah.
probably understand, what I was talking about, particularly with jazz. Because I went completely like, oh no, this is how jazz works. This
I
whole
love
thing.
jazz. Yeah, I studied it in
Yeah,
college.
well, I
I
do.
played in it.
I love improv jazz if
Yeah,
it's
me
well
too.
done in
Exactly.
person live.
It's the
Yes, I mean
best. It's the way it should be intended.
I'll settle for soft jazz or whatever on a trip, but like the stuff that I like is the live improv jazz. That's the good stuff. I don't want recorded music.
Yeah, jazz has the tools for that to happen well live. It's made for
Right.
that.
That you can only understand jazz symbolically. That you can't actually use, we'll say, the standard step approach that we've been, saying people don't even use that. They're
Well,
logically
I would say, yeah.
narrative.
This is an interesting point. Actually, this is a great point. So, um, to the novice, that's true. You can only understand, and I wouldn't even say novice, to the casual or even maybe the experience, but not let's say priestly class of jazz musicians. Uh, there is a sense in which you can only understand that symbolically, but you can understand it objectively if you dig and place the system on it objectively. But that requires a set of skills, knowledge, and otherwise that most people would never possess because the work required. Like, so
You'd
we
have
can,
to define objectively in some way I can agree with, and
yeah. I
that's
mean, I
gonna
guess
be
to some, well, it mathematically, I should say, maybe more than objectively.
oh, definitely not.
Yeah,
Definitely
and
not. Ben tried. The math doesn't map to jazz at all.
well, what I mean is, you can take what has been performed that would only be experienced, say,
Yeah.
symbolically and understood, and then take that and systematize it and
Y
mathematically
Yeah, you
explain.
can after it's been done, sure. You can do that with
Yeah,
anything
yeah,
with math. I mean,
yeah.
that's the great lie of math, is that math actually only ever works in hindsight, and nobody ever tells you that. Like,
Oh, I
there
see what
there
you're
are
saying. Sorry.
systems that can be predicted by math, but they're few and far between, and everything else is hindsight bias, and no
I
one
see.
ever gets
I
sample
got
by
you.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were talking about in the moment or when it's how it's being created and
Well,
understood.
even why you enjoy it. You
I
enjoy
see.
it because it's purely symbolic. It's purely experiential.
Well, yeah, I think there are probably people that enjoy it for its objective complexity, but even that's somewhat symbolic, right?
Well, I would
Like,
say
why
there's
do
no
they enjoy the
objective
complexity of it?
complexity. The complexity of good improv jazz arises in the moment, and you enjoy it because it's novel but it's familiar. And it's familiar because it follows a pattern, or one of many patterns that you're somehow magically familiar with. I mean, this is the Plato's form problem, basically. So, like, fair enough. But like that's it. Like it's
Yeah. Well, there's a pattern it follows, but then there's like patterns that it breaks, which makes it interesting to
but
some
that's
degree.
what I mean. Like
Yeah.
but it doesn't, right? It always starts out with this baseline of some kind, whether it's drums or or some kind of cymbal or some kind of cello or whatever instrument they're using, right? Or saxophone even, right? It always starts out within a pattern, and then the trumpeter usually comes on and then breaks that pattern somehow. Like they go with the pattern and then they break the pattern, and they form a new pattern together somehow, like they're weaving, right?
Yeah.
But how that unfolds is never predictable by math in the moment. It's always mappable by math, which is the difference after the fact.
Sure.
But
You can have some assumptions that you could make mathematically that will probably happen, but you can't be assured of it exactly. Right.
right, the certainty's not there because it's improv. That's the whole point of improv, is that you don't know
Yeah. I see where you're going with
they're
that.
going to end up with, and
Yeah.
that's
And
the
that's the beauty
beauty
of
of
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because they maintain the symmetry and they integrate the randomness, and you're like, well, how's that possible? See, that's symbolism. Like that's the thing that allows you to properly integrate what Jonathan Peugeot says is the center and the margin is symbolism. You can't do it any other way. If you try to do it the other way, you just flip the world. Now look around the world and tell me, right, it's all, quote, fundamentalism. It's all scientism. It's all logic, reason, rationality. When you try to use logic, reason, rationality to integrate the center and the margin, you just end up flipping the world and you end up in clown world every single time. That's why James Lindsay's on a bunch of sides, and then he gets into a fight for no reason with Jonathan Peugeot. Then he gets into a fight with, I forget who else was next. Then he gets into a fight with Carl Benjamin. Of course, Carl Benjamin freaking destroyed him, and he doesn't seem to realize that yet. But whatever, he's a little slow. And like not getting it right. Like you guys think you're unified because you agree on one little thing, but you don't agree on any of the other things, and you don't know that yet until you bump into them, and then the splitting starts again. And I'm like, it's just the Protestant pattern all over again. But it's not even the result of rebellion. It's the result of binary thinking. I mean, poor Carl Benjamin's freaking stream, man. I was just like, this is sad. It's just the tech bros versus MAGA. Like, what are you putting everything in a binary frame for, dude? You're never going to understand the world if you think there's only two things in it. You're never going to have a map of any part of the world if you make it about two things. That's never going to work ever. It's not going, it might work for a little while, maybe kind of, sort of, but it's never going to work long term. It's always going to fail within a few months or whatever. And they just keep switching targets and using new binaries. And this is why Lindsay's whole system is destroying itself, because he said woke right. And I'm like, you can't do that. Wokeism is a leftist philosophy, fundamentally. The right has standards and the left does not. And therefore, the right can never be woke, ever, because wokeism is a function of having no boundaries. And Lindsay can't understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's some that whole political paradigm is somewhat difficult because he's using, I guess, terms that have been co-opted to mean right, which they aren't exactly right wing,
Right.
fundamentally, but
They
they're
only have two buckets. They have to
Yeah.
put everything in two buckets, right?
Mhm.
Which let's imagine the level of stupidity here. Like, I mean that, like, I'm sorry. I know Lindsay's not stupid, but he is
Right.
stupid. And Carl Benjamin too. Go grab the voter rolls for your state and tell me how many people are registered Democrats, registered Republicans, and how many are registered independents. And then tell me why it makes sense to use two buckets. They're self-sorting into three, and the largest one is independent, I believe, still in all the states. Why are we talking about Republicans and Democrats when the largest group is independent? Just explain that to me, because you can't map it in your system.
Yeah,
which means
in
your
fact,
system
yeah.
is wrong.
Right. In fact, if you look at campaigning, it's always about moving the independents
That's right.
to some place.
And
Because
these
if it weren't about
political
that, then you just count your constituents and just call it a day.
these political pundits even talk about that and miss the point and slide right back into Democrat versus Republican. And I'm
Right,
like,
right.
you people are incompetent and shouldn't be doing this. You're not smart enough to do this. You might be smart enough to do something else. You might be the best physicist in the world, or a great mathematician, or wonderful accountant, or maybe you're really good at like managing communities, like any number of things, but you're not good at this at all. You're terrible at it. You're
Yeah.
terrible at it.
Well, it is hard. How can I say this? It's understandable why people get into a binary
Oh yeah.
because life has a bit of a binary-ish take. Well, Christian way is binary, right? It's sin and righteousness, in or out, right? Evil and
Well,
good.
you can
There's a
throw
sense of
anything into a binary. It's just that
right,
we
right.
don't live in a flat world, and that's it's not where we live, and you can't understand anything in a binary. Anything. It's
There's
like,
always nuance. Yeah.
yeah, there's always nuance, right? There's always the
Mhm,
third thing, and
mhm.
that's the problem. Like that's the problem with Neoplatonism, is that Plato knew there were three things, and the Neoplatonists were like, "No, bro, there's only the one and the many." And it's like, "Oh my God, that's not even remotely correct. You've destroyed Plato. You're not a new Platonist. You've denied Plato was correct, and then that makes you wrong because Plato was not wrong. Sorry,
He created a
I
new
don't know
thing.
what to
Yeah,
tell you."
yeah, yeah. Well, Plato's sort of a product of his own, to some degree, a product of his own position, right? Because I think, is it Peterson that's talked about that said this before, and I'm sure others. You can't truly you can't truly know the fallout of your ideas when they're adopted.
No, but,
But
and you
they
can
were his
describe.
ideas weren't totally adopted, right? They were twisted or moved.
No, they were completely adopted. You can watch my video on book 10 and
Oh, okay.
realize that Plato's entire system was manifested the way he outlined it, right? With the story of a resurrection.
Yeah.
That wasn't a story anymore. He told it as a story, and then something better than that happened. And like, seriously, and nobody mentions this. I'm like, you people are all intellectually dishonest to a degree that honestly, I'm like, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm just like, listen, like, you can't be here anymore. Like, we can't live on a planet with you. It's ridiculously dishonest. It's so insanely dishonest. It makes me angry. I'm like, how could you leave that out? And at the same time, you're saying, well, Plato hated Homer. I'm like, no, I don't know what book you read. That's not in that book. It might be in some other book. It ain't in that book. If you think it's in that book, you have a low reading comprehension. That's your problem. If you think Plato's Cave is about breaking out as an individual from the bounds of something, you are just a low reading comprehension. So I'm sorry, but like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what book you read. That's not what that book says. It's independently verifiable. It's not my book. I didn't write it. I can give you and I do in my video on the lies of Plato's Cave, I can give you the points where he refutes that explicitly. That isn't what the book says. Why are you telling everybody it says that? What's going on? Right? The end of book 10 is the story of a resurrection. The manifestation of Plato's system. And the Catholics have said this all along. Like, this is just Plato plus, bro. We just improved him. He was a Christian all along. Okay, I guess. Certainly looks that way to me. I don't know what these people read.
So I'm still thinking about the sort of the jazz symbolism thing. I was thinking because that particular book club was actually a really good exemplification of symbolism being participated in, and I think one of the really useful things is the way that we kind of play with scales, and like we were, which is interesting, playing with scales of jazz, but we were looking at we have our intentions, right? So we have it's already not flat because everyone is coming in with some sort of intention, hypothetically.
Right.
And then so you've got sort of the instrument that they're playing with, in a sense, and it doesn't necessarily have to be played that way. I mean, I guess you could, if you have a trumpet, you could probably, knock against it as a as a drum or something like that, poorly, if you wanted to. But a lot of times those jazz musicians aren't treating their musical instruments like porcelain or something like that. But the interesting thing that I thought of that particular episode, although it does happen pretty often, it was just a lot more explicit, is the fact that we also go and we have the intention for the week, and maybe we don't think about it. A lot of times I don't think about it, but interestingly, the chapter that we go over is almost always relevant to my week. And to Bruce's point, like, there is an aspect of being able to, okay, I can superimpose the patterns that I saw this week, and then I can kind of insert that into the thing that's happening there. But it is really interesting when it happens very loudly and I wasn't thinking about it. Like, when I didn't, a lot of times because I read this book way ahead, that sometimes I'll read way ahead in the chapters and I'll know, okay, if I read 3 chapters, I'm good for like the rest of the month, basically. And I'll just do that and just not even think about it until we show up and do the book club. And then I look at what I highlighted, and those are my notes. And but then I realized, like, oh wow, maybe I read this 3 weeks in advance and I didn't think about this at all. And then this week I've been really thinking about something because it keeps happening. And then we're going to get into that. And so it's interesting because I've coined a new word, which I'm going to unveil next week in our next, as my next intention title. But there is something that's really interesting there of, we're looking at, everyone is participating in their own way as sort of their instrument in the book club. Right. Each one gets a certain amount of use. Not everyone kind of responds quite as much, in the entire thing. But then you're also getting the amount of engagement that people had with the topic, whether or not they knew it was coming up that week during that. And then you have the fact that it's not really a book, but it's a lens through which to look at biblical stories, and then also the overarching patterns. So then we're engaging with Mathieu Pajot's work, and then that is giving us a way to interact with the other biblical stories. And that when you go and just read those stories on their own, like, no 2 people are going to wind up coming away with the same thing, especially because how they approach it. Someone might be doing it prayerfully, another person might be just doing it to download all the information into their head or whatever. Or you have multiple run-throughs, like you have the same people do multiple run-throughs, and they're going to catch different stuff depending on what other sort of stimuli they had going on and what other intention they had.
Well, so, and that's the key. And that's like, this is also what Plato talks about in the Republic. Like, and people talk about the Republic, they're like, well, I read it again and I got more out of it. It's like, well, of course you did, but whatever. Like, it's never the same river twice, and you're never the same person twice. Like, sure, whatever. This is the most banal take on the world of all time, but yes, also true. But like, I think what that indicates is that the world is huge. I think I did a live stream on that recently. Right? And you're small, and there's just lots of connections out there that are always there. And it's which ones you pay attention to, because your attention is limited, but they're all still there. Just you're tiny. You can't pay attention to all of them, but you can familiarize yourself with a bunch of them, and hopefully that'll just make things better. And that's where people get caught up, because the fundamentalism tends you towards the perfectionism, because it's within reach in this, like, it's way within reach. Like, it seems within reach. And then you're trying to do that, and then you're trying to perfect the world all of a sudden without even realizing. It just sneaks up.
Yeah. Well, I would say that that's true. One of the biggest errors that comes out of that sort of fundamentalism, perfectionism, is sort of like holiness doctrine that comes to. So what happens is, essentially, people have this position where they say you can become without sin in this life if you do the faith correctly and have the things. But what happens is people end up deconstructing or destroying themselves because they effectively are constantly under some um, battering of assurance, right? So they're constantly in a position where they're like, my faith isn't strong enough. It's not strong enough today. I didn't exhibit these sorts of signs. And so
Right.
their faith is
Right.
constantly in question based on an impossible standard that isn't
Right.
found anywhere outside of the
Right. Right.
fundamentalist standard. Um, Whereas the other side of the argument is, well, we're not perfectionists. We are in pursuit of knowledge of a holy God that is inexhaustible. And as you continue that pursuit of fundamentalism, you are eventually led into a pursuit of awe, reverence, and sort of smallness in the world, sorry,
Mhm.
in God's creation, which is, I think, would be the better position on that. So that would be like a feather in the cap of, I don't know, the fundamentalist that doesn't go that direction, right? So they go to the direction of sort of piety, or
Right.
you'll say minuscule uh view of self. Um
Mhm.
and then I think the right way to do it is to say uh the self has the highest calling in the world, and that
Mhm.
calling has called you to serve a holy God who has chosen you out of all of creation. When I say you, I mean image bearers, all people out of all of creation for particular purposes. Uh, and so that fundamentalism becomes not fundamentalism, but a something to hang your hat on when the world is difficult to understand, if that makes sense. And so the pursuit of that knowledge, or that perfectionism, um, is like that. The pursuit itself is worthy, not the end goal of perfectionism. And so that's kind of
Right.
my rationale around that. And of course, that's very like I don't know, reformed logical position, right? That'd be like, our pursuit is what's worthy. We're not going to get there, but the pursuit is awesome. Like, we want to know and understand God. Um, but you can fall into the ditch of what you're calling fundamentalism, perfectionism, and basically materialism, which is, I think, what's happened in a large portion of the meaning crisis, folks.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, the
there's
meaning crisis is all materialism, objectivism, individualism, and I think they all go together for some weird reason. Doesn't what
mm,
you fall into one, you get the other two for free. Like
Right.
it's a buy one get two more free sort of situation.
Yeah. Well,
It
they're
doesn't
skipping the
matter which
important
one you
parts.
buy. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
They're skipping the important parts. Yeah.
right,
Well,
right.
that's
Well, they're skipping all
some
the
of the
steps.
right. Like, there's the danger of the whole thing of going and being like, oh, I have to be perfect, and it's like, I would call that scrupulosity, which is actually a function of pride, which is an
Mm,
interesting thing, because you can go and say, oh, I have to be absolutely perfect. I need to do all these things. And
mm,
eventually it just winds up being this thing where you become your own judge. And then you're also trying to kind of like David Goggins your way through faith, and kind of
mm,
just, you basically dethrone God, and they're just like, I'm going to do this thing. And it's just like, no, it's given to you. Like, yes, there are people who actually in their life stopped sinning. Like, that is a thing, but that isn't something that they earned, and they would never say that they earned it. They received that, and there was a like, count them on one hand number of people that did that. And it's like, and they would not take credit, and then to the point of the thing of not going into like a quietism type of thing of, oh, because quietism is a lot like nihilism, but like
mm.
shrouded in saying that you're faithful. So this thing of like, oh, I don't even exist, and
Yeah.
before this majesty, like, there is absolutely nothing. Like, there is a sort of humble abasement that you can do, where you can do kind of like, okay, well, if everything was made out of nothing, then I have nothing of my own but my own nothingness type of thing. But it's not supposed to be like that. Can be really useful, actually, but it's not supposed to then put you in like a somber mood. It's like, look at all this cool stuff that I'm able to do despite my, like, I couldn't do this, but also look at all these amazing gifts all around me,
Right.
and it's like, it's supposed to be an optimistic sort of
Yeah. 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 You
perspective you get
you
from it.
have the highest calling, and you get to do things, right?
Right.
You're not obligated necessarily. You get to do lots of things, and indeed you're commanded to. So, like, the calling wasn't to become a pietistic cave dweller. The calling was to go forth and establish the kingdom, right? Or at least call, well, maybe not establish it. That's the wrong word to use. Point to it, right? Point people to the
Hmm.
kingdom. It establishes that becomes very odd if you say that because it has been established by Christ. But if you would say the pursuit of the calling uh, is like is the most wonderful sort of commissioning that could ever happen in the greatest army you've ever been in, right? That would be the better one. That's how I see it, and I think the Stoics get some of that right. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
the bad Stoics like Seneca or something, which I would say is like not great, in that world. Um, they kind of become a mess because they do nothing
Right,
eventually, right?
right.
It's so funny they do nothing. Um, so the telos in Christianity with the stoicism of self pursuit is probably a good combination.
And I like the cave dwellers to an extent. Like, I think they should exist because they exemplify the aiming. Like, their entire exemplification is the
Right.
aiming and everything. But also, there's kind of the difference between you get the guys that, like, I think it was St. John Chrysostom who just nails everything he ever says and still outdoes theologians, well over a millennium and a half later, and people
Yeah,
still
it's
haven't
called
figured this
golden
stuff
mouth.
out. Yeah, that he would. I think there was a period of time of like a couple of years where he just actually slept standing, and just like barely ate anything and just super, super ascetic. But then he would go out and educate people. Like he would actually do, the way that you talk about like the Plato thing, where okay, the guy should
Yeah.
be he should be brought down to the city. And like he was exiled literally, I think, by like the empress or something like that because he offended her. And he didn't care at all. And but then you get these other guys who are like the type of hermits where there was, I forgot who it was, but there's another saint that kind of writes about this guy with respect to modesty, and he does it as like an extreme contrast, not saying be this guy, but like here's an extreme example of a guy keeping custody over his senses. The guy had never seen a woman before in his entire life. He lived in a cave. He completely avoided people 100%, devoted himself completely to prayer. But the problem was, like, he demonstrated great modesty, just not a lot of the other virtues that you should have in like caring for your fellow human being. But a princess goes and hears about this super holy man and goes to meet him. And of course, this is the first woman that this guy has ever seen in his life. So he's incredibly offended. And she asks for him to pray for him. And he says, I'm only going to pray that I forget I ever saw you. And it's just like incredible modesty, like Olympic level modesty, but also lacking in so many other areas because all he did was the cave dwelling. Like maybe you
Right.
can cave dwell
Right.
99% of the time, but don't forget that last 1%.
Well, the cave in the desert, the Nazarite vow, or any of those sorts of things you want to look at were never permanent. They were temporary for particular reasons and time of
So
refinement.
there were steps. And you
Yeah.
need all the steps. And maybe not all the steps are for you, but you need all the steps. You can't skip the damn steps. Everybody wants to skip the steps. And yeah, I think you're right because we're handed everything. And especially in the religious sphere, which is suffering, I mean, most of the meaning crisis could be directly attributed to the recession of the church. Like that would be a fair claim to make, and I think it's completely defensible. And I think that's part of the problem is that no one wants to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Like they just don't. They don't want to deal with it because it seems too hard. But it's like when you just look at it, you guys destroyed the monasteries, and now all the functions the monasteries used to have moved to government. And government is garbage at all of those things because there were no governments that were ever designed to do those things well. And you can't design a government to do them well because, thank you, Castle, for bringing this up earlier, right? You can pay caring people, but you can't pay people to care. It's not an option. And so
Well, yeah.
the government can never do that work.
Yeah, that's true. I would say there's a caveat to that, I think. You can't pay people to care, right? But you can pay people to do formal good. while they may not care, right?
Mm.
Like we're
It
talking about intention,
maybe,
but they can
maybe.
do
I
formal
just
good.
I just think it's easier to do it correctly, which is
Oh,
to
I
put
don't
the
know if it's
caring
easier.
people. Yeah, you put the caring people in charge of orphanages, hospitals, welfare, mental health, and education. Because
Right,
if
but
you do anything else, it's never going to work.
right, but there would be yes, but the intentions or the caring aspects of those people is not necessarily first order. I mean, it is first order ideally, but the
No,
formality of it was what
you,
we're looking
you need
for.
to increase
You know,
it. And so you
hmm
start with people who care but aren't getting paid.
yeah,
This is
that's
why
true.
every time somebody says we need to pay teachers better, I'm like, yeah, that's the last thing you need. And that's the last thing you need by leftist
Well,
standards, right? Like
money
if
isn't fixing
leftists
any of that.
well, if leftists actually had standards or actually believed any of the things they ever said, which they clearly do not by their actions, then you wouldn't want to pay teachers more money. You'd want to pay teachers less money because according to them, money corrupts. It's like,
That's
okay,
right.
bro, I believe you. Then don't corrupt people. Don't
Oh
give
wait,
them
Mark, but if we
welfare.
didn't pay them, if we didn't pay them, nobody would teach then. No. You know who would teach? The people that care.
That's right. That's right. The people that care will always teach. They'll find a way. Exactly.
And then there
And
are people that would do formal good to care, to teach. Um, but ideally you have people that care running the ship, right? Ideally.
right. Right.
Yeah.
The
hmm
thing I'd worry about with the formal good guys is you could probably, if they lack discernment, then you could just slip anything in there, and then they'll just
Sure.
do whatever you're paying them to do.
I think
Sure.
Which,
that's the
That's true.
problem.
but yeah, I mean, if you're supplementing with some people who couldn't really care less, but you have a good organization and you need bodies, then like I agree, you could pay a few guys,
When
you
you
know.
need to, but you need to give those people something to do anyway. So it's not
Right.
like you can exclude them and
That's what I
relegate them
mean.
to the margin.
That's
Yeah.
what
You
I mean.
just need
Yeah.
to set up the organization so there's a space for them.
Well, for instance, there are people that don't actually care, right? And maybe they can't care.
Yeah.
Like let's say there are people with extreme autism. They just can't care. It's
Yep.
an odd, it's an odd thing, but they have a task. And that task
Yep.
is given to them by righteous men.
Right.
Right. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's kind of
Nothing
what
wrong
I'm
with
getting
that.
at.
I agree.
Mm.
I agree. Because somebody has to do the work. And sometimes the work has to be done by somebody who doesn't care. Like this is why companies hire consultants to fire people.
Right.
Because they can't do it because they care about their employees. It's not because they're evil. It's because they have to get a job done. And the only way to get it done is that way. And that's fine. Like it is what it is. Like the world is imperfect. And that's one of the trade-offs you make for being in the world.
Yeah. Sure.
It's like controlled demolition, like there's a
Right.
place for those guys in the world, but also you don't need them working at every single building.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Yeah, they need
look,
steps.
I'm gonna shut it down. Bruce, what do you got for closing statements for us?
Oh boy. Um Trying to stay on topic. Skipping the important parts. You need to lean on people that have done the thing you're doing, and have them give you the context by which you should understand what you're doing at least, so that maybe you could have some eyes to see the important parts that you're skipping. And I think ideally that would be in the context of the church. So that would be my closing remarks on the issue of skipping shortcuts and missing things.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, the postmodernism tells us we can frame it ourselves when almost never is that the actual case. And
Yeah.
you want the distributed cognition of the church to help you frame the most important things in the world. I like that. That's
Mhm.
really good. Well, Bruce is always excellent. We'll have to do it. We'll have to do a live stream one of these days, Bruce, during
I'll try and be nice.
during some time when we can outside of this pattern or something. Castle, what do you got for us for closing remarks? Even though you didn't see the freaking opening, although you were with me for quite a while here, so I appreciate that.
I'm gonna skip the closing as well. Let that be a lesson to all of you folks at home.
Ouch. That's just mean. I like it. I like it. Wow. Okay. Well, if that's what you're going to do for real, then I guess I'll have to roll with it. Man, this is my editor for my book. I'm in trouble. That's all right. We'll
But
figure
you
it out.
fired some shots at me earlier.
Yeah, it's fine.
This is
fine.
my revenge.
That's totally allowed on the pirate ship here. So no, yeah. Look, I mean, I sort of exemplified skipping steps in the beginning, and yeah, that's part of the subversion of the stream. We'll say there's lots of that going on. By the way, you won't notice all of it. I guarantee you. That's okay. It's all done for the good. I promise. And I really appreciate everybody showing up. I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and they didn't skip the steps of Christmas, right? Because actually the celebration should have begun on the 25th, not ended on the 25th. And so like our Christmas stuff is still up, obviously.
Until February 2nd.
Yeah. Well, the lead up for me is just too ingrained in me culturally, right? And so I had to do it. It's just and it's good. It like, brightens up the gloomy December to do a little lead up at least for a week. And I hope that people give more thought to steps and sequence and the importance of those things and takes it to heart that you need to understand that. Like, and you need to know your limitations. Like, there are steps you probably can't take, and that's fine. Find someone to help you. And let yourself be helped. Like, be humble enough to realize that maybe you can't do this, and don't be like this clown on Twitter who doesn't understand that food and water are fundamentally different resources from like iron and coal and things. Even after I tell him why, which is just, and the whole while saying, I don't understand your point, then maybe you should shut up and go away. Like, seriously, if you know you're outclassed, give up. Like, don't keep fighting, especially not against me. That you have no chance anyway. Like, I don't know what you're doing, but like, it's too bad. And it's okay to bow out. Like, I don't understand people's like, oh, I must engage. It's like, you don't have to. You literally can ignore things. You don't have to look at the woman on the subway burning. I know it's hard to avoid. Even I couldn't avoid it, but you don't have to engage with it. You can let it go. A lot of people, the reason why you have anxiety is because you don't let things go. And I had that problem for years, but learning to let go is super important to your mental health. And we're just living in a world where everyone's trying to hold on to everything in the age of gnosis because it's all information and information is valuable. It's like, no, it's not. Information's garbage. Most of it's obsolete before you get it. So keep that in mind and take the steps to calm yourself down and curate your signal and realize that no signal is also a signal because some signal will sneak in and you're kind of responsible for that. It's better that you give a signal that you control out to the world than you just let any old signal in. And just keep all this in mind, guys. And I'm going to do another stream next Friday, as far as I can tell. I don't know what the topic will be. Maybe there's a lead on to the last two here that are sort of concurrent. Maybe not. I'll figure that out at some point. And look, I hope everybody has a great week. Buy a cool shirt like Castle has on, because we have them available at the Mark of Wisdom shop. And you too could be better. Because that's what the world needs. Have a great week. I'll see you all next week. Thank you to my guests. And look, be better.